Good morning, everybody. My name is Brent. Welcome to Kensington. If this is your first time here at Kensington, Kensington is a safe place for you to explore your faith. Welcome. Today we're going to be concluding our series called Do Something Beautiful. We're looking at the life of Jesus, his beautiful story, and no matter where you are in your spiritual journey, your life can become something beautiful. If something from this message today speaks to your heart, or you want to find how to do some next steps, I want to invite you out to the Hub in the lobby after the service. The Hub is located under 3 televisions with a bright orange graphic, big graphic that says The Hub. All right, you can come out there. Somebody from guest services, our guest service volunteer, will meet you out there and show you some next steps you can take, get to know you a little bit, and point you in the right direction on your journey. All right, if you're viewing us online or if stopping at a desk after the service isn't really your thing, we've developed an online version called thehubtc.com. You can log on there, and so one of our staff members will be happy to answer any questions you might have. The band's going to come out in just a moment. Before they do, I'm going to invite you all to stand up. There you go. Turn to your neighbor and get some information from him. Where is the best place in this area to view a sunset?
Thanks again for watching our service today online and being a part of this community. Now, we know that you might have some questions as you watch the service today and want to find out a little bit more information about who we are. And so we've created an environment for you to do just that. Simply go to startingpoint.today. That's startingpoint.today and fill out a short form, and one of our staff members will reach out to you very shortly and answer any questions that you have about our church and about who we are. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the end of the service today to give you a little bit more information, but we'll see you here in just a few minutes.
To Awesome. Thanks so much for singing with us. For those of you who might not know who I am, my name is Ryan. I'm the worship arts director here. And this next song we're going to sing together, I wanted to kind of set it up a little bit. Who is at the last render? Anybody at the last render? Awesome. A few of you. Render is just kind of an environment where we introduce new songs, and we actually introduced the song we're about to sing together at that render. And if you were there, I'm going to kind of say the same thing. But the story for me behind the song we're about to sing is just really pertinent. So about a year or so ago, my dad passed away from stomach cancer. And during that time, my family and I, we were praying. We were just really seeking God, asking for a breakthrough. And in that time, we just kind of saw what was happening, and he wasn't gonna be with us, unfortunately. And in that time, my faith was really challenged. My mom's faith was really challenged. We were just kind of asking the question, man, where is God? And just kind of zooming out of that a little bit, what I saw was that God was with us during that entire time. And oftentimes we look at the problem as what God is gonna solve, but a lot of times God's there to help solve the anxiety about the problem, not the problem. And that's what a little bit this song is about. So I don't know if you're in a storm or if you're in a time in your life where there might be some stuff where you're dealing with God. You're like, man, are you there? What are you there for? I really hope that as we sing this song about Another in the Fire, that you'll sense that God is with you. And so when we sing it from that lens, my hope is that our hope level will rise and our faith level would kind of be united around this idea. You guys ready to sing together? You guys ready? All right, let's sing this out.
There's a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And would I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning? I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the water, holding back the seas. And should I ever be reminded of how I've been set free, there's a cross that bears the blood where another died for me. There's another in the fire. My dad left for dead beneath the waters. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. And should I fall in the space between and remains of me and this reckoning, either way I won't bow to the things of this world. And I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire. Come on. Standing next to me. There is another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminded what power set me free, there is a grave that holds nobody. and still is and will be through it all. Who believes that this morning? So come what may in the space between all the things unseen in this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. Yes, I know I will never be alone. Let's say there was another in the fire standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Yeah. And I can see the lights in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. I can feel the roar in the heavens as the space between wears thin. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls came down. Nothing stands between us. There's another in the fire standing next to me. There's another in the water holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding how I've been set free, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Sing it out. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
It's funny, if you're new to our church, the idea of like counting joy in battle, or counting joy when you're in a struggle, or counting joy when things like seem out of your control or things seem uncertain feels kind of odd. And then for many of us, even in the midst of like those kind of ideas, you meet somebody who is in the midst of a struggle that seems to have more joy than you. You ever experienced that? Like, have you ever been to the hospital and you met with somebody and like, well, you seem better off than me, you know? I'm upset about my car not working, you know? Like, and they're just like, they just have this thing that's just, it's just this centered and settledness that I think we all kind of long for. And I love this. When you talk to people, especially in circumstances that feel outside their control, but yet they're centered in joy and peace. For those of us who are here, and we just kind of know like that, that's because we just have trust that we're not the only one in that fire. And so if you're here today and you're like, you know what, I feel like, you know, I came in, I had coffee already. Some of you have had like 4 cups of coffee already. Anybody else? Just, yeah, me and you, bro. Yeah, like you're here, you got all the kids in the van, and you kind of showed up. But if you were really honest, like in moments of just a little bit quiet, you know, spaces, like your struggle feels like it kind of bubbles up. And so what I want to do before we move forward through the rest of the day is, but I'm going to pray for all of us, is that we'd be reminded of that truth, but over the next few minutes, whatever it is that you walked in with, right? Whatever family struggle you walked in with, work struggle, whatever questions or doubt or just angstiness in general that you feel, I just want to pray that for the next few minutes at least, that we at least package that up and hold it open-handedly and know that we're not alone in it. So let me pray for us, and then we'll move forward from there. Father, we love you so much. And God, we thank you that it is true that we're not alone in any of the circumstances in our lives. And so, Father, for these next few minutes, as we spend time together, I ask that you would settle our hearts to the point where we just come and we just find rest. For those of us who need moments of rest, God, I pray this day would feel like a big breath in a lot of ways. And God, as we talk about the things that we're going to talk about today, as we talk about what it means to live our lives in a powerful way, God, I pray that you would help us to find centeredness, not in our own striving or in our own doing, but in our own trusting in you and walking with you through our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hey, thanks so much for singing with us. You can give 4 or 5 people around you a high five. Let them know how glad you are that they are here, and then you can have a seat. Those are good high fives. Some of you are pounding. A little bit of 90s dap going on. Fantastic. Fantastic. My name is Patrick, by the way.
Should have introduced myself. So glad that you're here. If it's your first time, big shout out to you. We're glad that you're here. And if you're visiting Traverse City, you picked a great time. You're in the middle of about a 3-week summer, so it's great that you're here. It's fantastic. It'll start snowing in early August. I'm totally kidding. Don't say that. Don't speak that. Yeah. No, we're so glad that you're here, and today's a great day to be a part of what's happening here. And if you're here and you're like, you know what, I'm not sure that I even want to be at church this morning. Maybe your wife kind of dragged you here, or you come because your kids love it. I just want to say a big shout out to you. I love talking to people who show up and either they feel like it's helpful enough to keep coming, or their kids love it enough and they endure my messages. So either one of those, we just wanted to say we're excited that you decided to join us today. And also, if you're new to our church, I want to say this, that you're amongst some of the most incredibly generous people on the planet. If you're here, we've been talking throughout this series about what it means to serve other people and love other people well, and we're going to wrap that series up today. But you're also part of a group of people who also give generously to projects, both locally and globally, and you're making a significant difference all over the world. And so for those of you who partner with us in those ways, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all that you do. I know that we say that every week, and if you come consistently, it may feel like, you say that every week, but from the bottom of our heart, we're just so grateful that you partner with us. You're doing amazing things, again, here, but all over the world. And so we just want to say thank you so much for partnering with us. So we are going to invite our ushers to move forward to receive our offering. A lot of times we get asked questions, and I love this, about like, how do I give here? How do we do that? And it's really easy to do. You can give, obviously, when the basket goes by, but the easiest ways to give are actually digitally, and so most people here actually do that. You can text the word Kensington to 77977. You can follow the prompts on the screen. You can always give in less than 10 seconds on the Kensington app, or go to kensingtonchurch.org/giving. You can give there as well. So we'd love for you to partner with us if that's something that you feel kind of prompted to do, and we'd love to be a part of that with you. The other thing I want to let you know about is it feels like we just had a render service. Anybody else feel like that? Like it feels like it's flown by, but we have another render service coming up this month. It's going to be on Wednesday night at, I should have asked what time. 7? Is it 7? I feel like I should know that. I feel like I should know when I should show up for services, but I don't. So anyway, Render is going to be this Wednesday night. We'd love for you to join us. If you've never been, honestly, this is one of those environments that I wish I could get everybody to at least once. So if you've never been, I'd love for you to join us for Render this week. It's a Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Usually there's like 150 to 200 people that kind of pack in a room, and we sing together, we take communion together, and then I give a message. But we'd love for you to be a part of this, mostly because you get to meet a group of people. You come in on a Sunday, it's kind of fast-paced, but Render's a great opportunity for you to meet a group of people and really kind of dive deep and connect with some other people. So we'd love for you to do that. And again, that's this Wednesday night. It's in the student ministry room at 7 p.m. And then I also want to let you know that we have baptisms coming up. I'm super excited about baptisms. We tell the stories of people whose lives have been changed. And so that's what we're going to be doing, and we celebrate that with baptism. Essentially, we bring out a massive kind of pool. We put it right in the middle. People get dunked. That sounds weird if you don't know what that is. They go underwater and come back as a symbolization of the way that God is working in their lives, and like it's a new life that's coming out of that. And so we'll be sharing stories, and you'll see a couple of those coming up, which I'm really excited about. And if you'd be interested in being baptized, or if you've never been baptized, we'd love to talk to you about that as well. You can go out to the hub in the lobby, and we'll talk to you a little bit more about it out there. And then the last thing is family movie night. You're going to be hearing about this every week until it comes up. This is one of the biggest events that we do all year. We bring this massive inflatable screen out. There's food. There's all sorts of games for your family. And so we would love for your family to join us. And then I always say, if you're single or if you're empty nester, you know a family who needs to be here, right? So we'd love for you to invite people to that. You have cards on your seat. We'd love for you to take those either as a reminder to you, but especially to give out to other people to join us in inviting others to this. So usually we have anywhere from 5 to 700 people showing up for this every year. So we pack out the lawn. So the lawn looks great the next Sunday. It's amazing. And hot dogs everywhere. It's fantastic. So we would love for you to be a part of this. And I don't think I'm supposed to say the movie, but I think I've said it. So whoops. But anyway, it's a great movie that's a Disney movie about how would you even, it's Mary Poppins, forget it. Anyway, so it's going to be great. So we'd love for you to join us for that, for Family Movie Night. Hey, the last thing I'll tell you is we are wrapping up a series today. It's called Do Something Beautiful. And throughout this series, we've been talking about what it looks like to live our lives well, love other people, kind of come out of some of the things that hold us back in terms of doing that. And I'm super excited about today. I don't know that I'll tell 11 this, so this is kind of our secret at 9. Is that okay? Can we just keep this? What happens at 9 stays at 9, except That's not at all what we want you to do. But anyway, so please share it on Twitter. But today what we did is I kind of came in, I was talking to some friends last night. I had a couple of messages that I was kind of wrapping up and trying to figure out which one I want to go with. So I threw both of those out this morning and rewrote another one. And so I'm so excited about today. And so we won't tell them at 11 just in case it goes really well at 9. And if it doesn't, I've got 2 backups. It's fantastic. So you get to see. But I'll say this. What we're talking about today, it's been something that's on my heart for a long time, and I don't know about you, but when I have like random thoughts, I'm so thankful for Apple Notes, and so there's like a long Apple Note that's been really centered around the content that we're going to talk about today. But to get us into the message today, what we're going to do is we got a song that we're going to play, and I'd love for Carrie and Ryan to come out, and Bryce, actually Bryce and Carrie. I don't think Ryan's coming out, right? Are you embody all of that? So Bryce Bell, everybody. Can we get it for Bryce real quick? Bryce is fantastic. Carrie, come on out. Carrie is amazing. We're doing a song called Rise Up, and this song is amazing, and you'll see how it ties in as we move forward, but it really talks about kind of stepping out of our shell and doing things that is often hard for us to do. And so we're gonna sing the song, and then you're going to see a video after this by a friend of ours named York Moore, and York is going to be talking about some ways that he's moving out in his community and ways that he's done that, and then after that we'll jump into the talk. So one more time, give it up for Bryce and Carrie, and then we'll jump into the talk.
Broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out and move mountains. We gon' walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. And I'll rise up, high like the waves, I'll rise up, in spite of the ache, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you, for you. When the silence isn't quiet and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe, and I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet and move mountains, bring it to its feet and move mountains. I'll rise up, rise like the day, I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you,
never forget. It was the summer of 1988. We were just at the very beginning of the great drought of the late 1980s, and the grass under my feet crunched like potato chips. The ugliness of the earth beneath my feet was matched only by the ugliness of my surroundings. It was also the height of the crack cocaine epidemic in the Detroit area. Death by gunshot, death by violence, death by drug overdose. It seemed like death was a way of life. There wasn't much beauty in my world. And so that summer, when my mom had surgery and asked me to take care of the property, I had no idea where to start. She asked me to care for the grass, the trees, the shrubs, and up until that point, I don't think I had ever noticed any of those things. She was particularly passionate about a simple row of 5 bushes. And as I began to care for these bushes, these trees, these shrubs, to water, to weed, something magical happened. Transformation began to happen in my heart as I watched these shrubs just spring to life. And I saw the power of something lush and beautiful and green on our property have an impact on me and our community around us. It was almost as if there was a magical power in those simple row of bushes. We started to see a decrease in how many people were dumping garbage on the lawn, how many people were hanging out and loitering on our property. It was almost as if that simple row of bushes gave our house a modicum of respect. As I began to take care of that simple row of bushes right here, something happened within me. I began to change. I began to dream a different dream, to hope different kinds of things about my life. And that's the power of beauty. Beauty raises our eyes from what we see around us. It causes us to think about possibilities and potentialities. So imagine if we could actually choose to do something beautiful in our communities, amongst families who are in places of hardship, amongst difficult circumstances. We could literally change our communities. We could change the world as we come together with this belief that beauty does.
I love that video because when I think about York, if you're unfamiliar with York, he's got a book out. It's actually called Do Something Beautiful, and it's so amazing in the way that he kind of pictures and talks about what it looks like to move out in our world in a powerful way and to make like significant impact and significant difference in the places that we are. Now, if I'm really honest, I'm a person who grew up in church like from the time that I was a little kid. And I remember when I was in middle school, I don't know if any of you are like me, but I remember being in middle school, and I remember like reading through the New Testament, and I was super excited about it. I had all these check boxes that I had to get through all the time, and it wasn't because I was super spiritual. My mom promised me a video game. Do you remember Sega? Anybody remember Sega? Yeah, so I was getting a Sega. Sorry, Sega. It's a great name for a video system. Anyway, so she promised me a Sega game at the end of it, and so I was reading through the Bible, and I remember I was reading through the New Testament, and I got all these check boxes, and I got to this portion in an area of the Bible called Acts, and it talks about what the early church was like. And I remember thinking to myself, that is so fascinating. That is so interesting. That looks nothing like what we're doing. And I remember going back and just asking my mom, like, hey, I love our church. I love what we do on Sundays. It's so much fun. But I just remember going, I just like, what about this part? And we would talk about it, and we would talk about it. She would point me in different directions. And then I would meet these people who kind of like seemed like they were lining up more with what was happening. I remember being so fascinated with people who would talk about church, not in just a way that we gathered on a Sunday, one day a week, and, we sing songs, and, you hear a guy talk with a Britney Spears mic, that sort of thing, and then you go do your thing. It was so fascinating to me that there were groups of people who not only did that, but then they would take all that was kind of happening on a Sunday, and then they would leave and they would do something with it. In fact, I loved this. I would start talking to people whose gathering became very focused on both inspiring people to move and then also like as a force in the communities that they're a part of to go move and do extraordinary things. And I remember being so like taken back in a good way, like what if that was possible? And York's book talks about this, and it's such a powerful thing. And so today what I wanted to do, and this is why I kind of went back and forth on what we were going to talk about today. Today what I want to do is I want to look at one of the reasons in particular that I think sometimes it's so easy to miss what it actually means to not just go to church, but to actually like be the church in our communities. And so here's what I'm going to tell you real fast. If you're somebody in the room that's not a follower of Jesus, for these next few moments, there's going to be moments that I talk about things and you're going to be like, that's so good. Tell all those Christians what they need to hear. You know, you're going to want to do that, which is great. And then if you're a follower of Jesus in the room, at some points I might offend you. So that'll be fun. And then I would say this: if you're kind of like on like the spectrum of kind of back and forth, you're not really sure. Well, I should want to say it to you for the next few minutes. I want to hopefully over the next few minutes paint a picture of what could be in the lives of every single person in this room and us when it comes to both our community and the world. And we're going to talk about it in the context of beauty. Now, to get us all on the same page, what we've said so far during this series really lands on this statement right here, and that's this: that following Jesus, right, is an invitation to join him in creating beauty in the world, right? It's not just you memorizing a bunch of scriptures, even though that's important and that's great. It's not just you knowing so much about, the Bible or having all the right answers. It's not just about, you going to church every Sunday, even though we believe like that's important. It's about you joining Jesus in this kingdom movement where this kingdom is coming alive both in us and through us and all over the world, and that God wants to do something inside of us in some ways so that he can do something through us. And then we said this, and we said this last week, that your life ultimately holds the power to do something beautiful, right? Like within you have the power to not just do like 8 to 5 in your office and not just go home at the end of the night and binge watch, Netflix or Stranger Things like I did last week. Like you don't have to just do that, right? You can go and do extraordinary things wherever it is that you are in the world. And not only can you do extraordinary things, but you can do like truly beautiful things in the spaces that you're in. Now, you know what beauty is, right? Now, you've experienced beauty all over the place, and so we'll talk about like the experience of beauty. Like some of you, especially being in Traverse City, you've seen like a sunset that made you go, wow, right? Like that's kind of our claim to fame. You go to the water and the sunset happens, and you're just like, oh, there is a God. Like you just kind of feel that, right? Like you look out and you just kind of sense it. You feel like there's something else out there. There's something beautiful about those moments. If you've been, if you love cities, I love cities. It's like some people, we went to Chicago at one point. We did an architectural water tour. Have you ever done this in Chicago? And the tour guide was amazing. Like he was so great. And he's walking through all of these things. I just was so fascinated in the aesthetics of these buildings. And I remember like looking at Emily going, I didn't know that this was going to be a spiritual experience for me, but it totally was. Like it was great. Like you just kind of marvel at the beauty of what people can do. And then there's this one. I love this picture. Have you ever been to a really old, like, ornate church? Have you ever been to this? I love walking in there. It's quiet, Like, you walk in, and I used to go to a Catholic church. I would go there when they weren't having Mass. We'd go there for, special occasions, but I'd go there when they weren't having Mass. And I would just sit there and just, like, take in the beauty of, like, the stained glass windows. I would take in the beauty of the sacraments. I would take in just, like, so much of it because it was almost like it was telling a story, even though it wasn't really speaking. You just take that in and you feel it. And then I don't know about you, but I love food, so I find beauty in food all the time. Anybody else? Like, do we have any sushi fans in here? Right? I did not eat it. Yeah, I didn't start eating sushi until I moved here, and then we went to Firefly. You ever been to Firefly? And I went to Firefly. I was like, well, yes, like that's great. And then we went to Red Ginger. Somebody took us to Red Ginger one time. Chef Dan's. Anybody? Yeah, that was great. So, like, some of you look at this, you're like, that's beautiful. And then I had a friend that was a chef. Like, so in high school, we graduated. He studied to be a chef, and like the richness that he takes, not just in like preparing food, but in like placing the food on the plate. Like he made it interesting. I was like, there's beauty. There's beauty in that. And then this week, I'll show you another one. We went to a friend's house, and we were hanging out at his house, and they just got this new place, and we did like an offsite, and he took us around to the top area, and it overlooks the bay. And I don't know if you've ever sensed this, but like you just kind of feel really small in those moments. You ever do this? And we're standing with our friends, and we want to take all these pictures, and I look out, I was like, that's just such a beautiful thing. Like I don't control this. I have almost nothing to do with this. Like it just is, and it's beautiful whether I recognize his presence or not, or it's happy. Like it's just beautiful. And then some of you, and then we'll wrap up this part, but like some of you experience beauty in moments all the time. Like you're able to pause, kind of like we talked about last week, and you just like stop for a second and you experience like beautiful moments with your family or your friends or your relationships. And so I'll show you, we did like family pictures recently. Yeah, I'm a fan of this one. Now, this one's great because I had this moment where I'm laughing at Eleanor, and I'm laughing at Eleanor because she's smiling. And I love it when she smiles because she's so little. But the reason that she's smiling is because Henry's spitting in her face. And so it's great. So I don't know if we like edited that out, but like this is perfect moment. That's why Emily's like, oh my God, this is happening. And I'm like, oh, she's so cute. And Henry's like, sucker. Like, I'm like, it's so great. And I just remember like there were so many of these moments in the photo shoot where it's like, it feels like life goes in slow motion and you just go like, I'm experiencing not just a moment, but it's like, it's beauty in the world. So I put in my notes, I said this, like, follower of Jesus, not a follower of Jesus, however old you are, we all know what it's like to experience beauty in the world. Like, you know what it's like to be a person who is a recipient of the things that are in front of you. But the question that I want to look at a little bit today is, like, what does it mean to consistently, like, create beauty in the world? That you're not simply like a recipient of the moment. You're not simply a recipient of things that are beyond you. And you're not simply like a recipient or a consumer of those things. But you are indeed a person who lives their life consistently like creating and putting out beauty in the world. And some of you would go like, I'm the least creative person on the planet. And I'm absolutely talking to you today, for sure. And some of you are like, I'm uber creative. Like you just ooze creativity. And I'm like, I'm talking to you too. And some of you are like, I'm kind of in the middle of that. Like I remember drawing that one thing that one time. So maybe I've got a little bit, but I'm not sure. I'm talking to all of us. And those of you, especially in the room for the next few minutes, who are not a follower of Jesus, I'm like, I want you to at least consider what we're going to talk about. Because the kind of beauty that we're talking about isn't just like something that you take in. It's something that you actually produce. And I think the spiritual component of this is that God actually created all of us to not just be consumers of that, but to be people who create that kind of thing in the world. And so I said it this way. I said creating beauty in the world actually for us begins with a posture and an understanding. So to wrap up this series, we've talked a lot about the how, but today I really want to get under the hood of like what is actually happening in the heart that drives us to create beauty in the world. And so to do that, I want to talk about one particular person in the scriptures in the Old Testament. And some of you may have heard this name before, some of you have not. And if you haven't, I'm going to give you a really great word to use over lunch, and we'll just kind of be in this together. Is that right? So let's just go ahead and put this up here. We're going to talk about Mephibosheth. Can we do that real quick? Can we just say that together? Some of you are really nervous, especially about that second half, but we'll get through that together. You ready? All right, so on the count of three, can we say Mephibosheth together? 1, 2, 3. Oh, that was so good. Now, just the guys real quick, like your manliest, masculine, don't mess up the ending unless you think it's funny, and I might. So on the count of three, 1, 2, 3. Ladies, let's show them how it's done. 1, 2, 3. I love that, like, on the playback, all they're going to hear is, did they say that in church? Anyway, all right, let's try it one more time. Everybody together. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Mephibosheth. It's so great. Now, Mephibosheth is a fascinating individual in the text, and he's only present for part of it, like a really small part, but the narrative around him actually almost gives an entire picture of the gospel, the entire picture of the entire thing. And to understand him, you have to understand a little bit of the context about what's going on in his life. So at the time that we're going to talk about Mephibosheth, David is king, and David, little boy, slingshot thing and giant fall down. He eventually becomes king, and through his journey, though, he makes a really close friend that we'll talk about, and he also makes a really close enemy. Those people just happen to be related. And so the person that we're going to talk about first is a guy named Saul. Saul was king before David. He's kind of like the grandfather figure in this scenario. Saul is king, and then Saul ends up having a son. His name is Jonathan. Jonathan's an important figure, right? Jonathan's a part of this. And then Jonathan has a son, and his name is... Try that one more time. And his name is, you guys are so good, Mephibosheth, right? So Saul's the grandfather, Jonathan's the son, Mephibosheth is the grandson. Now, let me tell you about Saul. Saul is interesting in that he was essentially David's enemy. And not just like he talked bad about my mama kind of enemy. Like Saul was David's enemy to the point like he tried to kill David. There was a whole jealousy around the throne thing and God's anointed thing. It's a fascinating narrative in 1 and 2 Samuel. You can look through some of this. what we have is Saul being David's enemy, and then what's fascinating about the narrative and what makes it so like HBO worthy of a show is that even though Saul is David's enemy, his son Jonathan is David's like closest friend, right? And so you got Saul, David's enemy, his son Jonathan is a close friend, and then Mephibosheth is really in some ways unknown to David, right? I mean, he's just kind of like a distant sort of thing because, Jonathan had, multiple kids. So you have all of this going on. Now, here's what's happening, and I'll give you kind of the context of all this, right? Saul and Jonathan end up being killed in battle. And what we find then is David sort of rising to be king after all of this. And we don't know exactly how much time passes between their death and what we're going to read about today, but we know that there is some time that passes. And all of a sudden, the person that we're going to see and really be talking about, again, with Mephibosheth, right? He finds himself in a very unique circumstance. Now, this doesn't really happen, at least in America, I guess, to this point. But when somebody, leaves power during this time period, what often happens is the person who then takes power goes after the entire family, right? And not just, goes after them, imprison them, but oftentimes they would be killed. And so when Saul and Jonathan are killed, what we find is that there's this rush to save Mephibosheth. And there's a nurse that comes and essentially picks him up and literally runs away when she finds out that Saul and Jonathan are killed. And in the process of running, right, we don't have all the details around it in the narrative, but we find out Mephibosheth, right, falls and has this injury that would be a lifelong injury to his legs and his feet, and in some ways would be unable to walk from there. And so all of a sudden, now you have this, in some ways, distant royalty that's outcast and sort of safe because they're in obscurity. You have David, now on the throne, and then you have this moment where David is going to seem like he's going to lean into all of this and do something extraordinary. In a culture that would have pushed for, in some ways, Mephibosheth to be killed, David is going to do something that's kind of odd. And the narrative around this is going to be extremely weird. And for us, what I'm going to ask you to do, if you can for the next few minutes, as much as we're going to look at or try to look at this through the context that it was written, it's going to be really easy to look through this through 2019, Traverse City, Michigan world. But we're going to try to unhook that. And I want for you, for the next few minutes, to imagine that you're part of this world. Imagine that it was norm for you to see that if royalty came out of power, that their family would have been killed, and to look at these next few verses through the lens of David and Mephibosheth and the power that's within it. So here's what the narrative said. We're going to be 2 Samuel chapter 9. It says this. David asked, and he's asking some of his closest people, he's like, hey, is there anyone still left of the house of Saul whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? Because again, Jonathan was one of his closest friends, and even though Saul was not, he's like, how do I show kindness? Is there anyone left? In some ways, the assumption was, hey, we know that a lot of them were probably not left, but is there anybody left in all of this that I could show kindness to? And it goes on and it says this. It says, now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. Can you say Ziba? That's just fun. I don't know. That's just, I enjoyed that. I say that for fun. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, hey, are you Ziba? And he's like, at your service, which in my head, I'm like, no one's ever responded to me that way, but I hear that in Jeffrey from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Anybody else? You're going to see that pop up a couple times. So yeah, he's like, hey, look, David, I'm at your service. Now, in some ways, this is interesting because it's a formal type of thing, and in some ways, it's like, hey, you're king, and I know what you're capable of from your power and your authority and your position. I'm here to do whatever it is that you need me to do. Why? Because of you, right? And it goes on. And the king asked this, being David, is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness? And then Ziba answered this, right? He said, there is still a son of Jonathan's, and he is lame in both feet. Now, this is so fascinating to me because he doesn't even say, the name. He's like, look, there's this one guy, and he's crippled. There's one guy, and he's lame in both feet. And so David, it almost gets a sense of well, what are we going to do? We're going to move forward now. What does that look like? So David brings him in. David sends for him and brings him to the palace that he lives in. And what happens next is so counterintuitive to the people that would have been reading this. What happens next is so odd in some ways to what's going on during the kingdom at the time. Because we see an interaction that in some ways, again, encapsulates what the gospel it's all about. It goes on and it says this. It said, when Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. Why? Because there's certainly an amount of angst coming to the palace when the king could have you killed, because in your mind, that's a lot of what had happened in the past. And what I love here in the way that we translate it in English, because of the emphasis that comes next, David responds in a really awkward way, right? It says this, David responds with, Mephibosheth, exclamation point. To which you can imagine, like, if you walk and you're afraid that you might die, and you show up to the palace and you immediately, like, bow down to the king, and you're expecting, like, maybe not so great things to happen, and somebody shows up, and it seems like they're a little bit excited. You go, how much wine did you have before this interaction, you know? Like, are you that joyful about what's coming on? Because that feels kind of weird. We see David coming so, in some ways, emphatically to this man. And you know what he replies with? Can we say this together? At your service. Why? Because you're king. Because you're powerful. Because you're authoritative. Because I know what happens to guys like me in these moments. And David must have seen the fear. David must have known what was happening. David must have seen, even though he's emphatically, seemingly to embrace him, he sees the fear and he simply responds with, hey, look, don't be afraid, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul. Now, can we just stop here for a second? Can you imagine how emotional this would have been to this man who had lost, in some ways, his family, in some ways, he's kind of exiled, in some ways, essentially like a refugee in his own area. Like he's out of the mix. And all of a sudden, he's now kind of whisked up to the palace. And in fear, David leans in and says, you don't have to be afraid. That no matter what your circumstances are, no matter where you came from, no matter what you're thinking about right now, like, don't be afraid. And not only do you not be afraid, but I'm gonna restore back to you that which was lost. And then he says a statement that's so easy to pass over and it's so easy to look over, and it's just like, honestly, the first several times I read it, I was like, yeah, I don't even think about it. But in the context of what's actually happening, it's so incredibly powerful. I'm going to restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always have eating at my table. That this like big royal table feast situation that you see, right? That you get to come, and you will always have a place at my table. Which in my mind, again, I wasn't there, obviously. But in my mind, I think like coming in fear and shaking and trembling in front of the king. And what he does is essentially like roll out this like, you will always be a part of my family. You will sit at my table. How many of you, real quick, let's just be honest, how many of you didn't eat at a dinner table growing up? I didn't. Anybody else not do that? Like, you just didn't ever do it. We had the little trays that you would pull out, and we would sit there and like watch TV and do that sort of thing, which was really fun, and it had a lot of the same things. But I was always slightly envious of like bigger families who ate at the table. How many of you grew up in that family? Like, you grew up at the table and you kind of sat around. Yeah, at some point there were so many kids, you stopped using chairs, you just did a bench because it was great. You fit more in there, right? Now, at the dinner table, it's an interesting thing, right? Because all sorts of things happen. Can we just be really honest and pretend we're not in church for a second? Like, all things would happen. Like, dad sometimes would give like a narrative, like life lesson that was always awkward and no one really wanted to hear, but then he would point things out, you know? Like, there's those life lessons that happen. And then there's brother and sister spats, you know? Like, you would just fight, and you don't know why. It was just what you did at the dinner table. And then there's always that kid who throws food. Anybody have that kid? You know, like macaroni and cheese is there, and like, this is fun in your face. You know, like all of that's going on. And then if we're going to be really honest, again, we're not in church. Can we not be in church for a second? There's always the middle school boy who thinks it's funny to pass gas at the table. Am I right? Like, always that. And there's these fights that happen and conversation. And what it is a beautiful mess every time, right? Like, it's never just like, It's never just like this perfect, leave it to beaver kind of thing. Like it's messy, and it's weird, and it's in some ways hard. And sometimes as a parent, you go like, it's great, but at the end of the day, that was a lot of work, And then you have to clean up, and you have to do the dishes, and the kids say that they're going to do the dishes, and then they don't do the dishes. And so you say, husband, you should do the dishes, and he says, I will. And then so you end up doing them. And then all of these things kind of happen, right? And like it's just kind of a part of it. And it's a beautiful, chaotic, weird sort of mess. Your dinner table was nothing like David's. He had servants, so it's different, right? But there is this like family dynamic. And Mephibosheth is being invited into. And the implication on this, which is so easy to pass over, isn't that he would just have dinner for him. It was that he would be considered a son. That he was adopted into this royal sort of family situation simply because of his proximity to the king. I put in my notes, I said it this way. I said, proximity to the king is what's going to establish for Mephibosheth his status in the kingdom. That just minutes before this moment, he was an outcast. He was kind of the lowest part in some ways of this culture. And then all of a sudden, David says, no more, you will always have a seat at my messy, crazy family table. And the writer goes on, and shows the response that Mephibosheth has to this kindness. So Mephibosheth bowed down and said, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? Now that's like right in the feels, right? Likely still bowed to David. Likely just having heard in this moment David say, you get a seat at the table. I'm restoring things back to you. And his immediate response, like, my identity is wrapped up in being like a dead dog. Who am I to sit at this table? Now, what I love about this is David may have responded in any sort of ways. Like he could have said 1,000 different things, but they just didn't record what David said. And I think that's really powerful because they record the conversation, and for whatever reason, the writer doesn't even record David's response. It simply records what David does next. In light of that identity and in light of what seems to be happening, David doesn't even seem to respond to the identity that he's embraced. He responds by reaffirming what he has said. The writer goes on and says this. He says, then the king summoned, who they summoned? Still fun. Yeah, it's great. Saul's steward and said to him, I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops so that your master's grandson may be provided for. He says, why are you looking at me? I'm a dead dog. David says, hey, Ziba, real quick. You are to provide for him. And then he says again, and Mephibosheth, I love this, he goes on and says, grandson of your master will always eat at my table. To which if I'm Mephibosheth, I'm just kind of going, point of order, timeout, real quick. I just did this whole like emotional dead dog thing. You just passed that over. He goes, yeah. You're not that. It's not even the acknowledgement of that. It's like you are new. You are renewed. You are a different status altogether. Why? Because you are my son. You sit at this table. You are mine. And then it goes on. It says, then Ziba said to the king, your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands. Why? Because you are the king. His servant said to do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Now, I love this so much. And the reason that I love it so much is because when you pair this with the New Testament and the Gospels of Jesus, what we find in the redemptive work of Jesus is the same thing. That no matter what the past is, no matter where we currently think that we are, no matter what we've done, no matter what our sin is, no matter what has been done to us, no matter where we find ourselves in life, it's this invitation of coming and being a part of his table. Coming and being a part of this messy, loud, weird, mac and cheese throwing, chaotic mess of a table that is the church, and not a building church, and not a thing church, but a you and me in a community together. Big C Church. And the other part of this that I think is so interesting is that throughout the New Testament, when it talks about this invitation, it's not just like a random prayer that you pray when you're 6 years old, but it's this new way of understanding all that is. And it's this new way of understanding that you're not who you were, but now you are something different, and it's not because you were good enough, it's because Jesus did something and invited you to be a part of it. And you find these statements like whosoever throughout the New Testament, and you have these moments of like this whosoever, which means like this table is not just like a 6 or 8 person table, it's this massive sort of expansive table that just keeps expanding with the invitation. That the invite that goes out is not just some random sort of this is the people that are in. It's like, hey, whosoever, come, join, and follow and be a part of this thing. Put in my notes, I said, we are invited to this expansive table of Jesus. And some of you, if you're not a follower of Jesus, may have experienced a Jesus that constantly did this. Or you may have experienced a version of Jesus that says, like, get out of hell free card. Or you may have experienced a Jesus that said, hey, if you can get your crap together, then all of a sudden you're in. But none of that is actually in the New Testament. What we find is a Jesus saying, hey, this is happening. That this table is happening, this party is happening, this kingdom is happening. There is a seat for you at this table. Come and join me. And when you get to like the heart of Mephibosheth, his heart is kind of like ours. Like you probably don't refer to yourself as a dead dog, at least I hope not. We should talk about that if you do, but I feel like there's something in you that feels unworthy if there is a God in the universe who actually is up there and active in the world, that when your mess comes to light and you put it up against whatever a good God might be, you go, that just doesn't seem like those two things go together. But at the end of the day, that's the power of Christianity. That's the power of Jesus, is that Jesus leans in and says, look, I see all that. We're not like just pretending that it's not there, but I overcame all of that on your behalf. You're invited to sit at the table. And your identity is no longer what it was. You are changed. And that's powerful. But the flip side of that, and this is the part where I want to have a little bit of fun. Can we have a little bit of fun? You ready? The other side of this is that you get people who would say that they've accepted that idea, and then there's almost like this exponential growth of the table, which is what Acts is. Like Acts shows like how this early church just kind of grew and then divided and then grew and divided, and then, then all of a sudden it goes to the Gentiles or people who aren't Jewish, and then Paul starts franchising the thing all over the ancient world. And it's like there's not just one like real table, there's like thousands and then hundreds of thousands, and these tables all over the place. Now, here's what's so fascinating for those of you who are not followers of Jesus. All of a sudden, at some point in history, these tables started getting really exclusive. It's like, no. It's not an expansive table anymore. It's like, you can be a part of this if type table. That you're a part of this table, ... And all of a sudden, it's like the expansive table that we find in the New Testament becomes like this closed off thing that if you just think the right way or do the right things, and all of a sudden, the only people at our table are people who think like us and look like us and act like us and swear like we do with only the words that we think are good swear words, right? Sorry, that was for free. And the tables became so exclusive that others weren't invited. And some of us, right, we grew up in places where we never meant for that to be the case, and people who are leading those things, they never meant for that to be the case, but it just was the case. And here's how you know that. The question became like, who would you invite to that table that you were building? Who would you invite to that home that you were building? Who would feel uncomfortable coming to that table? And all of a sudden you have a list a mile long but all your Facebook friends are Democrats or Republicans, right? Like I don't know what that was. That felt right, but like, they all seem the same. And we create these echo chambers of theology. We create these echo chambers of politics. And we create these echo chambers of understanding the world that only reinforce the type of person that we want at our table. And I feel like that probably pisses Jesus off. I don't think Jesus ever intended for these tables to be so exclusive that we back up and go, only you are invited to this. The power of following Jesus is not that you just get out free. The power of following Jesus is that he changes you. And then we find ourselves in this space where we are called, I love this, to build expansive tables of our own. That we go out into the world and our literal dinner tables become sacred spaces where we invite people to join us. And we invite people who are different. And we invite people who disagree with us and look different and act different. And you doing something beautiful in the world is you doing something for people who are different in the world. Now, I've been wrestling through this a lot because, I'm a pastor. I'm also a 30-something-year-old white dude, right? In Traverse City, which is like not the most diverse area on the planet. Am I also right? That's just true. And there's a part of me that just goes like, it is so easy for me to get up in the morning and go to work, end my day at Target with some Starbucks, go home, be a dad, go to sleep, wake up, and repeat. And it's easy for me to let our table just become a place that just catches the rest of my life. But what's been hitting me so hard lately is that at the end of my life, I put this in my notes like this, at the end of our life, our greatest impact will be determined not simply by how much we know, which has been kind of the force of the series, but how expansive our table has become. Now, I knew this because of two people, Billy and Joy Phoenix, which you don't know Billy and Joy Phoenix likely. I lived in their basement for a while when we were in Atlanta. What I love about Billy and Joy Phoenix is that I was one of about, 100 people who lived in their basement at one time, right? Like they built their house with a basement so other people could be a part of it. And then I remember conversations with Billy over breakfast, and he would order whatever he ordered, and I would order the very masculine chocolate chip pancakes that I would order as a 20-something. Never thinking that chocolate chips stay in your teeth, but that's a different conversation. Anyway. And he invested in me over and over and over and over and over again. And he would invite me not just to be their basement dweller. He would invite me to be a part of their family and would speak in to us. The tenant before me was my wife, Emily, before me, but she lived there before, right, in the basement. And they did the same sort of thing. We talk about Team Holden in our hashtag because Billy and Joy Phoenix told us that when you have a family, it's not just about a marriage, it's about you being a team. I watched how they raised their kids and the way that they corrected their kids, and it did something to me. There was a night when I was 24 years old. I had the really awesome opportunity of my best friends and I, my two roommates from college, all lived in the same 2-block radius for a while, and we worked together at the same church in Ohio, and we did church all the time, right? And there's a doing church kind of thing. But then there was one night where we sat at our kitchen table, and we opened up Acts 2, and we just started reading Acts 2, and we started talking about it, and we started being really vulnerable. And about midway through the conversation, it felt more spiritual than almost anything else I had experienced. Why? Not because there was some weirdness. It was just that it was sacred. Why? Because there was just something happening at the table. I hung out with friends last night. Had an amazing view, and we're sitting around playing a game, right? And there's food, and there's brownies, and then there's jokes about the brownies, and then there's graham crackers, and I ate 12 of them. I just didn't want anybody to know it. And I just kept, and then there's always new friends at the table, and then there's old friends at the table, and then there's just community, but that's not really the word, is it? It's sacred. And then all of a sudden you do something weird at one point in your life, and you invite somebody into your life and into your table who you know thinks nothing like you. And you sit there, and all of the things that you held so tightly to began to be loosened because now all of the things that frustrated you and made you feel secretly better than are wrapped up into a human being's story. And it happens around these spaces. And so I was thinking so much about like, how do we wrap up this series? And we've talked to you about like serving people, and we've talked to you about like doing stuff. But my heart for our church and my heart for us isn't that we would just go serve, even though I think you should. It's that you would spend your life with a goal of expanding your own table in your world. That your table would be filled with people that you have relationship with for 35 years. And it would also be filled with people who you don't know hardly at all. And that there would be people of all ages that are a part of your table. And there would be people who you pour into their life. And at the end of your life, when you think about the impact that you had, and I don't miss this, it would be almost like a room full of people at the longest family-style dinner table that you ever had. And it would be people who just experienced their own humanity together amidst the centeredness and the sacredness of Jesus. I sat and I watched our Facebook feed this past week. I didn't even know this, but Facebook actually does a great job of like telling you what your political affiliation is. I didn't know that. And then it tells you like religious too, which is pretty great. So it like echo chambers for you, which is pretty fun. And so I started doing this over the last, I've done it for a while, but I would like go through and I would just like follow people that were different than me just so that I could see and understand and hear stories. And then I would go out and meet those people, which is a really awkward Facebook message when you go, hey, I know that you don't know me. This is out of nowhere. We should just hang out because I don't agree with anything that you just said. And I want to know why. I want to be a student of that. You know? And I thought to myself, I was like, everybody feels weird in the political climate. There's all sorts of angst, whatever side you land on. There's all sorts of great debates that should be happening. But most of them are not happening around a table like this, are they? They're not happening with people who like are really listening, are they? Faith is the same way. I grew up in 3 different denominations who all are like holding very fast to what we know to be, you know? And I was like, but I want to know why you think that way. Like, what if our tables were filled with people who just see the world vastly different than us? So I think 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, those of you who have kids that are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, who have walked away from the whole thing, them coming back is going to be a beautiful picture of this. Not how good my talks are or how great the music is. It's going to be, is this messy, crazy table, in fact, irresistible? And does that draw people back in? So here's my challenge to us. This is what I hope that we work to apply, and it's this. That we work to expand our own tables, right? And in doing so, I would hope that we do this. I hope that we work to do for a few, right? Which means that you can't do this for everybody. There's not like 500 people that you're going to do this with this week. There's just not. But there's probably 2 or 3, right? And you already probably know who those 2 or 3 should be. That you're not doing this for everybody, but there are a few people that you should do this for. There are a few people who you know vastly see things different than you do, and you need to ask them their story before you ask them what they believe. You just need to get to know them in this space. You need to do for a few. The other one is this, and this one's hard for a lot of us. You need to prioritize a relationship over risk, right? And this has so many implications, and I know that it has so many implications, but to go like, I'm going to prioritize a relationship with you versus like trying to change your mind, trying to logic you out of whatever got you there. Because the assumption that in like 4.5 minutes, which I always feel like I can convince somebody to come my way, right? Even I'm never right, but I just feel like I can logic you into anything, even though you spent 47 years with the opinion that you've had, but in 4 minutes, I promise, watch me. You're just not. What would it be to like prioritize the relationship over the risk? If you read through the New Testament, this is Jesus's really evangelism strategy in general, right? He wasn't worried what everybody else thought. He wasn't worried about what all of the people who got it all right thought. He was just present with people who, in a lot of ways, thought differently, saw differently, even sometimes his closest followers. Prioritize relationship over risk. And the last thing is this. I think you need to serve others in proximity, which means some of you, and this is me. This is me, Thursday. I am great with relationships to an extent, and I'll keep you at as much of a distance as I feel comfortable. But what does it look like to invite people, truly invite people in to your own brokenness? And here's how you know. This is fun. I had one of these this morning. Who is close enough to you that you actually feel like you sometimes need to apologize to, right? You ever had one of those? That's a great barometer. Because if they're not close enough to see you mess up, they're probably just not close enough, right? Who in your life have you, you can put on a veneer to an extent, but at some point you have to go, who are you close enough to see you mess things up with every once in a while? And go, I mess up the relationship. You need to invite people in terms of proximity to be close enough to where they see the good, the bad, the messy, who you are. So here's what I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to ask Bryce to come out. I'm going to ask you to do something at the end of the series that we've never done quite like this before. And so again, you may be the only ones that do this, but we'll see what happens. 11 o'clock, I'm going to do something different. But I think this is powerful, and this is an exercise that I've been working on over the last week and a half, and I'd love for you to do with me. So I'm going to invite Bryce out. I asked them this morning to bring out this massive table, which it's not light, so the team is going to take that away over the next couple minutes. But I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm going to ask you to do two things after this question. And I'm going to ask everybody, if you would, to do this. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, and don't freak out, I'm not going to ask for anything weird, but I'd love for you, if you would, to pull out your cell phone just for a second, if you would. So I want you to pull out your cell phone. Everybody do it. There's not going to be any weirdness, but I promise. But this is for you, not me. Or if you'd rather, I need to write on something because I only write on stuff and I don't do anything digitally, that's fantastic. You can do that too, right? But I want you to pull out your cell phone just for a second, right? And then Bryce is going to play, so you kind of have a little background music, which is only really for you just to be able to focus for the next couple of minutes. But you pull out your cell phone, and here's the question for you, right? This is the question that I hope you always are asking, but you're asking specifically right now, and that's this. What 3 people in your life need an invitation to your table, right? Now, the reason I ask you to pull out your cell phone is because I want you to open the Notes app, or whatever we call it on Android. I don't know any other phones than those 2. I'm sure they're out there. Whatever your way of writing down things is. For me, that's sometimes I'll do Outlook. If you need to email yourself, that's totally fine. But I want you just for a moment to think about that. Some of you, you have it immediately. Some of you need to think about it. But I want you just right now to write down 3 people. And if you don't have 3 people, I want you to write down, I don't have 3 people right now. I need to pray, which is totally okay. That's not a cut on you. I'm just going you need to pray that God will show you who these 3 people are, right? So I want you just for a minute to write that down. I'm going to invite the team to come out. You guys can go ahead and strike all this. If you want to. I know I'm kind of doing it a little different, but let's do that. All right, so for a moment, who are those 3 people that are currently not at your table that need to be at your table, right? I want you to reflect for a minute. Think about their names. Get that down. That's great. Thanks, fellas. All right, now if you've done that, here's what I'm going to ask you to do, right? Most of those 3 people that you probably wrote down, you may not have all of their cell phone numbers, right? But you likely have one of their numbers, right? And this is going to be real weird, especially because we don't ever do this in church. I know we don't ever do this in church. But I'm going to ask you to do something kind of odd. I'm going to ask you right now, because I know that when you leave here and you go to lunch, wherever you're going to go to lunch at, you're going to feel whatever, and you're not going to be thinking about this as much. But for the next minute, right, just for a second, I'll ask you to pick one of them and invite them to something now. On Sunday, this message has gone longer than I meant it to, at 12:20, I want you to be hey, can we have coffee this week? Can you come over to the house this week? Can we hang out this week, right? What are you up to this week? I'm trying to think I'm an introvert, so I actually have to write down questions to invite people to things. Do you want to go see the new Spider-Man movie? No one wants to see the new Spider-Man movie. That's a joke, right? whatever that is, right? I want you to like pull out your phone. I actually want you to text them, if you would. One of those three people to say, hey, I'd like to get together this week. So go ahead. I'm going to give you a chance to do that right now. I did it this morning around 5:30, so if you're wondering, did he do it? I did. I woke them up. It was great. It wasn't great for them. All right. Now, the last thing I'm going to have you do, as weird as this sounds, and then we're going to sing together. I'm asking you, like, hold your phone with all those things, or your notepad, or writing utensil, set of communication things that you did. And what I want you to do is I'm going to ask you to pray this prayer, right? And the prayer that I'm going to ask you to pray is not for the other person, but it's for you. I want you to hold whatever that device is or whatever that thing is. And the prayer that I'm going to ask you to pray is, God, help me to do this more. It's not deep. Help me to do this more. And here's my challenge. That if we were to do what we just did in the last minute and a half every single day, when you're 80 or 90 years old, there will be a group of people who line up to thank you. Which is what we almost want anyway. So hold it out in your seat, whatever. And I'm going to ask you to pray that prayer. God, help me to do this more. All right. So in our time, the band's going to come out. We're going to sing a song called Gracefully Broken. And there's a part of this at the end. It talks about your power at work in me. Carrie sings it. It's all like, we all get amped because it's so good. When we get to that part in particular, I'm going to ask you to sing that out. I'm going to ask you to sing that out as a prayer. And what I'm going to hope that's at the forefront of your mind is doing something beautiful in the world is going to require you to do versions of what you just did tens of thousands of times throughout the course of your life. And our hope here is that you choose to do that and that you make a significant impact in the lives of people all over. So if you would stand, I'm going to pray for us. Van's going to sing the song, and we'll wrap up. Father, thank you so much, both for the image that you gave us through this narrative of David and Mephibosheth. God, for what you did on our behalf over and over and over again. The ways that you show your grace to us over and over again. I pray for the person in the room who's been a follower of you for a long time, who felt extremely uncomfortable the last couple of minutes. God, I pray that this would feel normative. I pray that you would help us to work to expand our table, specifically with people who see things so vastly different than we do. And God, I pray that you would help us to be people who are those you use to heal and those you use to love in extraordinary ways. Those who would be known in our city as selfless, those who are known in our city as empowered, those who stand in light of their own brokenness and in the fullness of submission to you, and that you would use our lives to make a significant impact in the world. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Take all all to Jesus now, holding nothing back. We're holding nothing back, 'cause I surrender. I surrender. Yes, I surrender. I surrender. Arms wide open. Here I am. Pouring out my life, gracefully broken. Here I am, God, arms wide open. Here I am, pouring out my life, gracefully broken.
Your power at work in me. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be free. Your power at work in me. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be free. Your power at work in me. God's gonna work
I'm
in
strong
me.
when I am weak. I will be free. Your power at work in me. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be free. Your power at work in me. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be free. Your power at work. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be
All right, so many of you actually took me up on the challenge, which I'm so glad that you did, and you did that right here in the room. And so the challenge, like overarching for this week, is I'd love for you to do what we just did today, every single day this week. One day, or one time a day for the course of this week, I'd love for you to do that and reach out to those people. And we'd love to know stories as you begin doing that. The other thing I want to let you know, too, is next week, we're kicking off a brand new series. It's called Kensington at the Movies. And so we're going to be looking at kind of big films and then kind of breaking down concepts from those things when it comes to our spiritual life. And so it's a great opportunity to bring somebody, especially somebody who goes, I don't want to listen to a guy stand up and talk for 40 minutes. You're like, great. You don't have to. You can watch a movie during that time as well. So it'll be perfect. So we'd love for you to join us next week. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. But we're kicking off that series next Sunday. Again, thanks so much for being here. We'll see you right back here next week for Kensington Goes to the Movies, Part 1. See you soon. Thank you so much for watching online. We're so glad that you decided to join us today, and we hope that you enjoyed your experience with us. And the challenge that we give to everybody in the room, we would also give to you. We would love to extend that to you, that every single day this week, what would it look like for you to send out one of those text messages to somebody, make those phone calls, and what would it look like for you to expand your table in those ways? Again, thanks so much for watching, and we want to invite you to follow us on social media if you're not doing that. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and those are the best places to find out more information about our church, get a behind-the-scenes look as well. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next week. See you soon.
Good morning. My name is Brent. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If this is your first time here at Kensington, I want you to know that this is a safe place for you to explore your faith. We are concluding the message today called Do Something Beautiful. We're looking at the life of Jesus and his beautiful story and how that can inspire us, no matter where we are, what our circumstances are, to make our story beautiful as well. If something from this story, from the message today speaks to your heart, you want to connect in some way or take some steps on your spiritual journey, I want to invite you out to the Hub out in the lobby. The Hub is located under 3 TV screens and a big orange graphic that says, conveniently, The Hub. If you stop out there, one of our best guest services volunteers would be happy to answer any questions you might have, how you can get connected, maybe point you in the direction of some next steps you can take. If you are visiting with us online today, or if stopping at a table isn't quite your thing, you can visit the Hub on an online version called thehubtc.com. Log on there, and one of our staff members will be happy to answer any questions you might have as soon as they can. We are going to sing with the band here in just a few seconds. So I'm going to invite you to stand, turn to your neighbor, and give them this bit of information. Where do you go to see one of those beautiful 10 o'clock sunsets here in northern Michigan?
Hey everybody, this is Patrick, and I just wanted to say thanks again for watching our service today online and being a part of this community. Now we know that you might have some questions as you watch the service today and want to find out a little bit more information about who we are. And so we've created an environment for you to do just that. Simply go to startingpoint.today. That's startingpoint.today and fill out that short form, and one of our staff members will reach out to you very shortly and answer any questions that you have about our church and about who we are. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the end of the service today to give you a little bit more information, but we'll see you here in just a few minutes.
Awesome. Thanks so much for singing with us. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Ryan. I'm the worship arts director here. And we're about to sing another song. It's brand new for us. It's called Another in the Fire. And anybody was at Render this past Render? It's kind of like our monthly like worship environment. Anybody at Render this past time? A few of you? Cool. Clara's like, me. So cool. So I shared a bit of my story of like what this song we're about to sing means to me. And about a year and a half ago, my dad passed away from stomach cancer. And that was a really trying time for me and my family and my immediate family. All of us are Christ followers and would say that we've known and followed the teachings of Jesus for most of our life. And so for us to be praying for that and being in that situation was really tough and hard. And a lot of the way I sing this song is kind of from that place, remembering that God is still sovereign and he's still good, even though we don't see all the picture and the whole thing. So I don't know if maybe you've been through a similar situation, or maybe you are in a situation right now where you're just questioning like, man, where is God? And one of the big truths that I kind of took away from that experience is oftentimes that God is not going to necessarily solve the problem in the way that we want him to solve it, but he's always there to help solve the anxiety we have about the problem. And so that's my encouragement to you. If you're here and you're interested in kind of engaging in this with us and singing it, that's the place that I would love for us as a family to kind of sing. You guys ready to sing? All right, let's do this.
There's a grace when our heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and the reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire. Standing next to me, there was another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever be reminded how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears the burden, where another died for me. There is another in the fire. No longer a slave to my sin anymore. What you found, it's a peace between in the midst of me, of this reckoning. Either way, I won't bow to the things of this world. And I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire.
Free. There is a grave that holds nobody.
said this morning.
So come what may in the space between, in this things unseen, in this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. Yes, I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Oh, and I can see the light in the darkness, as the darkness bows to him. I can hear the roar in the heavens, as the space between resting. I can see the ground take beneath us, as the prison walls beat in. And nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. Another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how you've been to me, got the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Got the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
I love that song so much, in part because if you're here and have you ever like experienced somebody who's going through something difficult and they seem to just have more centeredness and joy than you? Anybody else? Like you're a little frustrated that somebody messed up your order at Wendy's or something, and then you're like all amped up, and then you end up with somebody and they're like, you know what? I just have joy and centeredness, and you go like, where does that come from? Like, and for many of us, like you're in the room and you came here this morning and you like loaded up the kids and you got in the van or the SUV and you showed up, but like in the back of your mind, there's like these floating kind of levels of angst that you just carry with you constantly. And so today, before we move forward into the message and the rest of the service, what I want to do is I want to pray for all of us in the room. And whether you're somebody who's carrying a lot of like baggage with you in here today and you just haven't acknowledged it, you like package it up and just put it aside, or you're somebody who like as soon as you walked in, you just felt the weight of it all together. I'm going to pray that just for the next few minutes, it's not that we ignore that, but at the end of the day, that we're just reminded that the God of the universe is close to us and he sees those things. And at least for the next few minutes, that we might just kind of experience peace together. So let me pray for us, and then we'll go forward from there. Father, we thank you so much that you are not distant and that you are close. And God, for the person who is here today and, they have all sorts of angst in their heart or life, and there are situations that they haven't figured out how to control, or situations that feel bigger than them. God, I pray that you would just remind them that they don't have to go through that alone. I pray for all of us that when it comes to our view of you, that it would never be a distant God, but that we would always choose to view you as a personal God, because you are. And over the next few minutes together, God, whatever we walked in here with, God, I just pray that we would essentially just kind of lay that at your feet and come and fully be present, fully be engaged, and open our minds and hearts to what you have to say to us today. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hey, thanks so much for singing with us. Go ahead and give like 4 or 5 people around you a high five. Let them know how glad you are that they showed up today, and that they are here, and then you can have a seat. Hey, we're so glad you're here. My name is Patrick. I'm the lead pastor here, and if you're like visiting Traverse City, we're so glad you decided to spend Sunday with us. And props to you for like going to church on your vacation. I don't know that I would, but I'm glad that you did. And we're so glad that you decided to hang out with us this morning. And I want to give you a little bit of information about our church. You're amongst, I think, some of the most incredible people on the planet. Not just because they showed up to church on a Sunday, because of how generous so many of the people who are here today are with their time and their resources. You're amongst a group of people who volunteer all over the city, who are making a significant impact in the world by both going and volunteering in other parts of the world and also giving to initiatives all over the place. And so if that's you and you're here and you do those things, we just want to say thank you so much for being a part of this. And if you're new to our church, you're like, what is this place all about? Really, you kind of get to see what we're about in a lot of ways through the actions of those individuals. And so this morning we do like a tithes and offering kind of moment in our service, and we're going to do that today. We're going to invite our ushers to move forward. And for those of you who do give here, we want to say thank you so much. And if you haven't given yet and you're interested in being a part of that and joining this mission, there's a few ways that you can do that. You can text the word Kensington to the number 77977, and you can follow all of the prompts there. You can also download the Kensington app, which is a great resource to get all sorts of information, but you can also give there as well. You can do that in less than 10 seconds on the app, or you can always go to kensingtonchurch.org/giving, and you can give online there as well. And then I got a couple of announcements for you. It's weird. I feel like Render, we just did it like yesterday, but that was about a month ago. So we've got another one coming up, which I'm really excited about. It's going to be this Wednesday night. And if you've never been to Render is one of those things that I wish I could get everybody to come to at least once. It's a really amazing environment. There's about 150, 200 people that kind of show up, and we pack in to the student ministry room over there, and we sing together, we take communion together, and then I do a message as well. And so we would love for you to be a part of that, in part because of the service, but more for us, it's a great way to meet people here at our church. And so if you're new and you haven't really met a lot of people, you kind of come in and out quickly on a Sunday, it's a great opportunity for you to meet some people and to be a part of that. So we'd love to invite you to do that. The other thing is we have baptisms coming up, and we're so excited about that. You can sign up at kensingtonchurch.org/baptism or at the hub. But really, this is an opportunity for us to talk about life change stories here at our church. And it's an amazing Sunday or set of Sundays where we just baptize people and we tell their story, and you get to hear it. And then we have like our baptism pool right here in the middle, which is amazing. So you kind of get up close and personal to those things. And so we would love for you to be a part of that. If you're interested in being baptized, if you've never been baptized and you've taken steps in your faith this year, we would love for you to do that. And then the last thing I want to let you know about is family movie night. Family movie night is coming up, and I think there's a card near your seat. And so I would love for you to go ahead and grab one of those cards. We've been giving you one of these cards really every week, and we're going to be doing that leading up to family movie night. Family movie night, we have between 500 and 750 people that kind of descend upon this place, all kinds of kids, and it's so much fun. We love to invite you to be a part of that. And then if you have your family, obviously we would love for you to come and come with other families. And then if you're an empty nester or if you're single here in the room, you know somebody who needs to come and hang out here. And so we would love for you to invite people and show up and volunteer and be a part of that as well. So we have a massive like inflatable screen. We show the movie, and then there's all sorts of food and games and everything for your kids. So we'd love for you to do that. And then we just tear up the lawn, which is also fun for me. So for the next 2 weeks, there's just hot dogs in the lawn. It's fantastic. So that's kind of true. But anyway, we'd love for you to be a part of that. It's a great environment for you to come to and experience a little bit about our church. I'm not supposed to tell you the movie, Mary Poppins, but it's going to be great. And we would love for you to watch that with us. Last thing I want to let you know about is today we're wrapping up our series called Do Something Beautiful. And the way that we approach Sundays, if you're new to our church, is we kind of take like a set of topics and unpack it over the course of a month. And so we are wrapping up this series today and kicking off a brand new series next week. And I'm super excited about today. I don't do this a lot. In fact, I told somebody earlier, I think I've done this 2 other times since we've been here. And so I had a message planned last night, and then I like punted on that altogether. And I told the 9 o'clock crowd, I was like, you guys kind of get to be the guinea pigs, because if this is terrible, 11 o'clock just gets what I planned the first time. So it's great. But it went better than I thought it was going to be. So I'm super excited about it. I've been writing a version of this talk for about 9 months, and I just kind of settled on it this morning around 5:30. So a lot of coffee, and it was fantastic doing that. So I'm super excited about today. I will say this too before we get into the talk. If you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus, I love saying this to people, but I was like, if you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus, there are going to be parts of the talk that you just feel like, preach to all of them Christians, which I'm excited about. You're going to get really excited about some of the things that I'm going to say. And if you're a follower of Jesus, I'm probably going to offend you at some point today. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be fun. So I would just, yes, do it. So it's gonna be fun. So we're gonna talk today about something that's I think I'm very, very passionate about, and I think it's gonna be a great day. But to get us thinking in that direction, we've got a couple elements to set up the message. And the first thing I want to do is I want to invite Bryce and Carrie out. Will you guys give it up for Bryce and Carrie real quick? Super excited about this. This is one of my favorite things, this element that we've probably done. It's a song called Rise, and it really kind of sets us up both emotionally and with the words to what we're going to be talking about today. And then after that, you're going to get to hear or see a video from our friend York Moore about how he's making an impact in the community and how some of that's kind of impacted and changed his life. And so as you're listening to this song, I want you to both like feel the weight of it, but at the same time, I really want you to pay attention to the lyrics because I think it is something that's very inspirational to us, and it's going to set us up for what we're going to talk about for these next few minutes. So one more time, give it up for Bryce and Carrie. We're going to sing out Rise together.
You're broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out and move mountains. We gonna walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. I'll rise up, high like the waves. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, when the silence isn't quiet and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe, and you know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet and move mountains. We'll take it to its feet and move mountains. I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you. All we need is hope, and for that we have each other, and for that we have each other. We will rise, we will rise, we'll rise. Oh, we will rise. And I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I will rise up 1,000 times again. And we'll rise up, rise like the waves. We'll rise up, in spite of the ache. We'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for for you.
I'll never forget. It was the summer of 1988. We were just at the very beginning of the great drought of the late 1980s, and the grass under my feet crunched like potato chips. The ugliness of the earth beneath my feet was matched only by the ugliness of my surroundings. It was also the height of the crack cocaine epidemic in the Detroit area. Death by gunshot, death by violence, death by drug overdose. It seemed like death was a way of life. There wasn't much beauty in my world. And so that summer, when my mom had surgery and asked me to take care of the property, I had no idea where to start. She asked me to care for the grass, the trees, the shrubs, and up until that point, I don't think I had ever noticed any of those things. She was particularly passionate about a simple row of 5 bushes. And as I began to care for these bushes, these trees, these shrubs, to water, to weed, something magical happened. Transformation began to happen in my heart as I watched these shrubs just spring to life. And I saw the power of something lush and beautiful and green on our property have an impact on me and our community around us. It was almost as if there was a magical power in those simple row of bushes. We started to see a decrease in how many people were dumping garbage on the lawn, how many people were hanging out and loitering on our property. It was almost as if that simple row of bushes gave our house a modicum of respect. As I began to take care of that simple row of bushes right here, something happened within me. I began to change. I began to dream a different dream, to hope different kinds of things about my life. And that's the power of beauty. Beauty raises our eyes from what we see around us. It causes us to think about possibilities and potentialities. So imagine if we could actually choose to do something beautiful in our communities, amongst families who are in places of hardship, amongst difficult circumstances. We could literally change our communities. We could change the world as we come together with this belief that beauty does.
Love that video, and I love York Moore a lot as well. His book is called Do Something Beautiful, and we've based a lot of the series off of some of that content. And what the book is really about, as you kind of got a glimpse from it there, is really about going out into the world and going out into our cities and our communities and the areas that we've been planted and doing extraordinary things and giving our lives to something that's bigger than us. And the book is phenomenal. Like he did a great job of kind of unpacking that. And for the last 2 weeks, we've been building on some of those ideas. Like, what does it mean for us to both experience beauty in the world, but also be dispensers of beauty in the world as well. And I love what he talks about. I love what it looks like to go out and do that. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to take that maybe one step further. But before we do, I want to get us all caught up on what we've said so far. And so kicking off this series, we really based everything off of this principle right here, and that's this. That following Jesus is an invitation to join him in creating beauty in the world, right? So following Jesus is an invitation to be a part of creation or creating beauty in the world, however that looks, whatever that is for you. It's about creating beauty in the world. And then we said this. We said that when it comes to your life, we said this last week, it says your life holds the power to do something beautiful, right? That you have something internally that you can do to make the world a better place. And there's 1,000 different directions that you can go to. But we've been challenged over the last couple of weeks to really hone those things in and actually take steps into doing beautiful things in the world. And today what I want to do is I want to kind of jump from there. I want to kind of go a little bit deeper into what we've been saying. Before we do, I feel like we all just need to get united around the idea that we experience beauty together, but we experience beauty in different ways. Now, how many of you, real quick, how many of you are from Northern Michigan originally? Where are you at? Like, you're from Northern Michigan originally. That's great. How many of you you're past the fudgy stage, but you're not like from Northern Michigan originally? Anybody else? Like me too, yeah? All right, so that's awesome. That's great. So many of us, right, if you've been around for any amount of time at all, you know that when you get to Northern Michigan, there are so many beautiful parts about it, but there's nothing really more beautiful than like Northern Michigan sunsets. Am I right? right? Like there's something about like standing out and you see the water and you see the sun and you see all sorts of colors and you stand there and you just kind of experience beauty, right? You're just kind of like a consumer of some of that, and you just stand there and there's something about it that you just like, it just feels good, right? In northern Michigan, summer nights, right? You just kind of look out and you see these kind of sunsets. And then some of you love cityscapes as well. Like some of you like to go to big cities and you feel this. We went to Chicago a while back and we did like an architectural tour, and I like geeked out so hard. Like it was amazing. We were like on the little riverfront and our tour guide was amazing and he was walking through each building. And I just found myself so fascinated. Like I turned to Emily and I was almost like, I didn't realize this was going to be a spiritual experience, but look at that building. You know what I mean? Like it was fascinating to me. I love it. And one thing I love to do too is I love to go to like old churches that have like ornate art in them. Have you ever done this? Like growing up, we would go to this Catholic church every once in a while, and I would just go when it was open but nobody else was there and just kind of sit and then like just take it in, because there's something so incredibly beautiful about like the pieces and the stained glass and the sacraments and all of that together. Like it was just an amazing experience. You just kind of consume that. And then if you're anything like me, like some of us, you know this, like I find beauty in food. I think that's pretty obvious, but how many sushi fans do we have in here today? Like how many of you are sushi fans? How many of you hate sushi? Where are you at? Anybody hate? Oh, you sinners. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. I didn't eat sushi until we moved here, and then we went to Firefly. How many of you guys been to Firefly? Anybody been to Firefly? Yeah. I had sushi for the first time at Firefly, and I remember eating it. I was like, I like this whole situation. Like it was just great, you know? And then we went to Red Ginger at one point. Anybody been to Red Ginger? Yeah. Like Chef Dan's sushi. Oh my God. We'll just leave that there. Anyway, it was amazing. So some of you, like, you see this. Now, I had a friend that was a chef, right? And he would take so much time, like, just not only in cooking and preparing the food, but in, like, how the food looked when it came out. And he would get so frustrated if it didn't look exactly right or exactly the way that he prepared it. And you find beauty in those kind of moments, right? And then this past week, some of our team went to do an offsite, and we went to a friend of ours. We went to their house. They have, like, a new house that kind of overlooks the bay. And he's taking us around on this tour, and this was, like, our view for part of the offsite. So we got nothing done. Just kidding, we did. But we looked out, and I'm looking out, and you see the bay, and you see the trees. I love this little like barn, and you just kind of feel small, right? Like I had nothing to do with the way that this looks. I only sat there and experienced it, but the experience of that beauty was, in some ways, like overwhelming, right? And then some of us, we experience beauty when it comes to our relationships, and we experience this a lot with families as well. We just did like a family photo shoot, which is always fun and maddening with kids, and this is like one of the pictures, and I love this picture so much. Yeah, oh yeah, they're cute. Yeah, I know. The reason that it's cute though is I'm looking at Eleanor like, oh, look how cute she is. She's smiling. Emily's looking at Eleanor like, oh gosh, this is actually happening, and Henry is spitting at Eleanor, which is why she's smiling, right? Like, that's what's happening in this family picture. He's spitting in her direction, and Emily's like, what in the world? I'm like, my daughter's so cute. And Eleanor's like, water. You know, like, it was great. And so, like, when it comes to these moments, you just kind of stop, and you pause, and you look out, and you're like it feels just overwhelming. It feels beautiful. It feels like kind of the way that it should be. It feels a little bit transcendent. Now, the thing that's true of all of us, follower of Jesus, not a follower of Jesus, no matter how old you are, no matter what you think about God, like any of those things, the one thing that's true of all of us is that we all know what it means to experience beauty in our lives. Like, we all know that. We all know what it's like to be a consumer of the beautiful things that are around us or the beautiful relationships that we worked hard to build. Today I want to go like further, because I don't think you were just meant to experience beauty, though I think that's true. I think you were meant to be someone who creates beauty in the world. That you weren't just meant to like look out and experience beauty, but you were meant to be a person who like goes into the world and is a creator of those kinds of things as well. And so today the question we're really going to look at is like, what does it look like, or what does it mean to consistently create beauty in the world around us? Now, some of you, mostly those of you who are accountants by trade, would go like, I'm not really a creative person, right? I'm kidding about accountants. But like, I just like, I'm a numbers guy or whatever that is. Like you go, I don't think about creating beauty. And there's no man in the room that when I said we're going to talk about creating beauty, they got excited. Like I understand that as well. But there is something in you that I would say like you were birthed. That's weird. You were born. No one wants to think about I was birthed. Anyway, you were born in some ways to create something in the world that draws people into the transcendent nature of God. Like we were all meant to do that. In some ways it feels small, in some ways it feels big, in some ways it feels like 1,000 little moments along the way, but you were meant to draw people into the transcendent experience of the divine. You were meant to do that. And you were given the capacity to be a creator of those kind of moments and those kind of situations in your life. So I put it in my notes, I said it this way. I think creating beauty for us begins not with knowing a bunch of things, but really it begins with a posture of open-handedness and moving into a space that sometimes we feel like we can easily neglect. And so today what I want to do is we're going to look at a little bit of a slightly obscure Old Testament passage, and it's about a guy whose name is like phenomenal. And so if you don't get anything else out of the talk today, you're going to be able to walk out of here and say a really cool word and mess up your waiter or waitress wherever you go eat lunch, which I'm super excited about. And here's the person's name. I love it, all right? So we're going to have to say this together. The guy's name is Mephibosheth, right? Feels pretty good to say it out loud. So I'm going to have you say it. Can we say it together on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. Mephibosheth. That's pretty good. You're a little nervous about the end of it, aren't you? Like, can I say that in church? Like, it gets kind of weird. Say it fast online. It's not great. All right, so I want to say it one more time with everything you have, as passionate as you can possibly say this word together. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Mephibosheth. So good. Now, fellas, I want you especially. Like, I just need this to be as masculine and manly and not 7th grade squeaker as possible. You ready? Count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Wow, that was pretty good. You guys kicked 9 o'clock's butt. That was amazing. That was so good. All right, ladies, can we show them up on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. That was good. That was really good. It was a little awkward, but it was good. It was good. It was really good. Now, Mephibosheth is interesting because he's a central character to the narrative that we're going to look at today. And he's interesting because of the context around him, right? He's interesting because of everything else that's happening. And he's interesting in some ways because of who his daddy is and because of who his grandfather is. So let me walk you through a little bit of lineage. It'll be short, but I think it's important to know. So Mephibosheth is connected to a king named Saul. Now, Saul is like the grandfather of this whole thing. Saul's a big deal. If you read through the Old Testament, Saul's name's going to come up. There'll be moments where it's really good, moments where it's real not good. But Saul was like the king at a certain time period. And the person who followed him was a guy named David, which is the same David. Little guy, slingshot, giant fall down. That's David. Now, Saul is a part of this. Saul is king during a lot of the things that are going on. And then he has a son. His son's name is Jonathan. And Jonathan is Saul's son, who is kind of heir to the throne. And then Jonathan has a son whose name is... That's so good. See, you guys are so quick. That's so good. Yeah, Mephibosheth, right? So Saul's the grandfather. The son is Jonathan. The grandson is Mephibosheth. Now, here's what's so interesting about the narrative today is... during the time that we're going to look at in Mephibosheth's story, the king is David. And what's interesting about David is very deeply connected to this family. And the reason he's so deeply connected to this family is because the person who was king when David was kind of coming up through the ranks was, in fact, Saul. And Saul got really jealous of David, and there's all sorts of narrative around this. I feel like you should read 1st and 2nd Samuel. It's an amazing, amazing passage. But Saul was essentially like David's enemy, right? Like, this is what makes this whole narrative like HBO Game of Thrones worthy because Saul is like messed up in the head. Like at some point, like throwing spears at David, and at some point, like David's on the run, and Saul's kind of going after him, and then at one point, like David's playing music for him. I mean, this is all kinds of messed up. And then all of a sudden, what makes it even more interesting is that one of David's closest friends is Saul's son, Jonathan, right? It's like Jonathan's like David's friend. Jonathan's dad is David's enemy, and in some ways, we're going to see in the passage, Mephibosheth, right, is unknown to David in some of these circumstances. Now, what happens in the ancient world, and some of you know this, especially during this time period, is when it comes to Saul, when it comes to Jonathan, if they were essentially like ruling the kingdom, right, there came a point where they both died in battle. And what happens after this is once, a king would die in battle, essentially what would happen, and it's kind of morbid and fairly graphic, but essentially what would happen after that is if you were connected relationally to the king, they would come after you, and they wouldn't just put you in prison a lot of times. They would try to kill you, right? There's a part of them that's like, how do we just kind of end the bloodline, be done with them all together? They're done. And so what happens is Saul and Jonathan, they die in battle, and then we really get to kind of the left, or what's left of Mephibosheth. And his story, in some ways, doesn't just start when he's born. It starts when his father and his grandfather passed away. And what happens next is we get this narrative where the nurse essentially like grabs Mephibosheth and runs away. She finds out that Saul and Jonathan are dead, grabs him up and begins to run away. And we don't get all the details around it, but we know this, that along the way, he falls, and he falls to the point where he sustains an injury with his legs and with his feet that makes him where he is not going to be able to walk again, and makes him to a place where he is going to experience life in a lot of ways crippled in the ways that they would have been viewed at the time. Like he wasn't able to do some of the things that people thought he should be doing. And then he becomes like this outcast, essentially like a refugee in his own like area, and he's put aside. And we don't know exactly how much time passes between that moment, right, when Saul and Jonathan die, when he is kind of whisked away and this injury happens. But we know that he is kind of put away in an area of the world and in some ways forgotten about, like the lowest parts of the status of the area and the community that he was in. And so we're going to pick up as King David, now all-powerful in some ways in the kingdom, and the head honcho leading the whole thing. He finds a moment where he wants to do something good, specifically as it pertains to Jonathan. And this is where we're going to pick up in the narrative. This is 2 Samuel. We're going to be looking at chapter 9. It says this. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now, I love this. The fact that he's asking, is there anyone left, gives you a glimpse into how these things usually work, right? It's kind of like saying, is there anyone left in your family because now you're no longer, alive, right? Like that's just kind of the assumption. And it goes on and it says this, and I love this part. It says, "Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba." Can we just all say Ziba? It's fun, right? Ziba's great. We all wanted a crazy uncle named Ziba. Anyway, so they summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he says this, he says, "At your service." Now, I love this. In my head, I always say that as if it's like Jeffrey from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Anybody else, like at your service? Like, that's just what happens. Like, it's just a Jeeves type moment, right, for me. And so he says, "At your service." So Ziba shows up. Ziba's connected to this whole area where Mephibosheth is. And it goes on, it says this. "The king asked, 'Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?' And Ziba answers the king, 'There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet.'" He doesn't really say his name. He says what's known about him. He talks about his brokenness. He talks in some ways about his status. He communicates where he's at on the pecking order of status in the community. I love what happens next because it doesn't seem like David cares. David responds essentially with like, "Let's just go get him. Like, bring him to me. Bring him around. Let's see this guy." And then here's how the writer describes that moment. I love this. "When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor." Why? Because it's King David. And not just because he's king, but because if you're king and you're connected to the previous throne, then usually these moments don't end well for the person that they summoned, right? Like, he would have probably not been thinking that they're going to go hand me a Hershey bar. Like, that's probably not at the forefront of his mind. He's thinking, this is not probably going to go well with me. And what happens next is so fascinating. Because we get this moment of emphasis from David. And I love how it's written. I love this. He shows up, bows to pay him honor, and then David responds with, "Mephibosheth." To which means, like, why are you excited to kill me? Like, why are we feeling so happy? Like, the text and the way it's written, it's like there's this emphatic moment. And it's like, what is the emphasis here? Like, he comes and he bows and he's like, they kind of prostrate down in some ways before David, and David's like, "Hey, what's up?" And Mephibosheth would have been like, "How much wine did you have before I came? Like, what is this?" And you know what he says to David next? In the style of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, "At your service." Why? Because David is the power one in the moment. He lays down, bows to David, and you see the juxtaposition of the emotion. You have one who is afraid, bowing, frightened, scared, and then you have David who's just like, "What's up, bro?" All in the same moment. And we get like the sense that David is like now coming to grips with what this moment actually is for him. And what he responds with is almost like, it seems in the text like this almost like overzealous, excited, emotional kind of thing in his response. He says, listen, don't be afraid, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father, Jonathan, and I will restore you to all the land that belonged to your grandfather, Saul. Now, I wasn't there. I don't know exactly how this went down. But at least for me, at this point in the narrative is when I feel like Mephibosheth kind of like head down and kind of looks up real confused. Because what David is saying is like, not only going to be good to you, not only am I not going to kill you, but I'm going to restore back to you what was lost from the beginning. That I'm going to restore back to you what was lost a long time ago. That you're no longer going to be in obscurity. That the things that, they talk about you when it comes to, that he has lame legs, when they talk about that, like that's over there. That's done with. That's over there. You're no longer like in that status anymore. I'm inviting you into something more. I'm restoring. I am making things new. I am doing something that you don't quite sense yet. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul. And then he says a really weird statement that I've passed over so many times, but it's so powerful when he says this. And you will always eat at my table. Now, I don't know about you, but like dinner tables are always so fascinating to me. How many of you grew up in a home where you like never ate at the dinner table? Like I rarely ever did. We had like the movie trays. You remember those? Like you would sit in the recliner and you put out the movie tray and then we would watch TV and we'd hang out together, but it was just me and my mom, so we didn't really eat at the table a ton. Anybody else do that? You used to eat at the table a lot growing up, right? How many of you like you ate at the table all the time growing up? Anybody, you did that? Yeah, it's funny. So when you come to the table, it's always interesting because I would go to a friend's house and we would experience this together. Dinner tables are crazy places. Am I right? Like if you have kids, you know this too. Like it's not this like silent, peaceful, leave it to Beaver kind of situation. Like it is nuts, right? You have people who make the food and then you put the food out. And then if you have kids around the table. And depending on their age, like the conversation can go lots of different directions, right? And then typically there's like the person who's the adult who wants to give the life lesson that no one cares about. You remember this? Like some of you, that was your dad. And no matter what was going on, like you're talking about algebra. And he's like, well, let me tell you what X equals in your life. And you're like, Dad, be quiet. Like there's these kinds of moments, or at the same time, like especially like the ladies in the room, this, like all they wanted to ask you about was dating, like who it is that you were going out with or planning on going out with or wish you were going out with. And then your dad would just talk about how he wanted to beat him up the entire time. Like that was your experience. And then if you have little kids, like you put food in front of them and it's almost like you put toys in front of them because all they want to do is throw the food. Anybody else? Like my son who's 3, he looks at macaroni and cheese and he says, this is a baseball. Like that's just how he experiences mac and cheese. And you have all of the chaos kind of going on at the table. And then my favorite part, and can we just pretend we're not in church for a second? Is that cool with you? You always have the middle school boy who likes to pass gas at the table and thinks it's funny. Anybody else know that person? Like some of you, that's your family, and you've taught them and you've prayed for them and you said, please just let that not be the case. But no matter what happens, silent, but it's deadly. And you just don't want to eat anymore. Like all of that is the messy, chaotic version of what happens at a dinner table. And yet, as chaotic and messy as it is, it's beautiful, isn't it? Like there's a part of you that just wishes you could go back to your dinner table with your parents one more time, right? There's a part of you that thinks like, I wish I could just have like 300 or 400 more dinners with my kids who have left the house. Some of you are going to college, and that's going to be part of the thing that you miss. Like you're going to miss the chaos that happens in this space. And so when David invites him to be a part of this, he's not just inviting him to be a guest, because it's not that like guests really sit at your dinner table always, right? It's that he's inviting him to be a part of his family. And it wasn't anything that he did. Mephibosheth was just hanging out one day. Somebody came and got him, and he shows up, and now he's got a seat at the table. I put in my notes this way. I said this: the proximity to the king, in this case, establishes the status in the kingdom. That when he sits down at that chair, at that table, his life changes forever. Now, his response to this whole situation is incredible. And honestly, I was reading through it again early this morning, and I was like, it's such an ironic, in some ways, response to what he had just been given. He responds to David like this. He bows down, and he says, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Like, David is looking at him. He's bowed down, like head back down. He's like, wait a minute. Why would you even consider a dead dog like me? Like, do you not know who I am? Do you not know where I came from? Do you not know what is happening here right now in my life? Do you not know what happened when I was a kid that made me like this? Now, I love what happens next, because David may have responded or he may not have. We don't know exactly what David would have said next. It's not in the text. But what the writer captures next isn't a verbal response from David to Mephibosheth. It's an action. And here's what the action is. I love this. In response to the dead dog comment, it says this. Then the king summoned Ziba again, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. And you and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops so that your master's grandson may be provided for." Now, again, we have this moment where, like, Mephibosheth laid, bowed down, says, do you not see that, I'm like a dead dog? And David doesn't even acknowledge the comment. He responds with what he's going to continue to do anyway. And then he ends this part of it by saying this. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, you will always eat at my table. That he is mine. That he is my son. And then Ziba responds with this. He says, your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do. Why? Because you're the king and all powerful. I'm going to do whatever you say. And so Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Now, this is a long time before Jesus came on the scene. But the writers of the New Testament, in some ways, as they talk about this gospel or this good news for the world, in some ways seem to refer to it, even Jesus himself referred to it in this type of scenario. That the grace of God is given in this powerful way to those who don't deserve it, which is all of us. And it's not based on what we've done. It's not based off of what we're going to do. It's not based off of anything like that. It's that the God of the universe loved us enough, cared for us enough, did for us what we can never do on our own, and then extends love and grace in this way. And the other powerful part about this throughout the New Testament and what we see in this narrative is that when it comes to the table, Jesus seems to invite all people to the table. That it's not just a table that just kind of is ended and it's just here. What's more powerful is that this king's table is this big, massive, expansive table to the world. And it's not just for 5 or 6 people, and it's not for those who just get it right. It's not for those who believe all the right things and figure it all right perfectly. It's an expansive table for all people. And that the God of the universe invites you to be a part of it, summons you in and says, hey, look, you get to sit at my table. It doesn't matter the way that you view yourself. It doesn't matter what you've done. You get to be a part of this crazy, chaotic, messy thing that is the church. And not a church in terms of a building like this, or not a church in terms of comfy seats and a guy with a Britney Spears microphone giving a message, or a great set of musicians, but the church in the way where it is throughout history and humanity, those who are connected to the power and the grace of Jesus. Which means that no matter how far away you are from that now or at any point in your life, the truth is that we are all invited to this expansive table of Jesus. That he invites us to be a part of that, whether we feel worthy with it or not. Now, I love that truth, and I love that passage, and I love those stories. But the part in me that I think is so fascinating is the more that I'm around the church, right? And from that, I mean, like, since I was a little kid, there are a lot of people who get this part of it. But the way that the early church is described is so incredibly powerful because in some ways, it's talked about as a group of people who gather like this chaotic sort of thing like this table. That it's a group of people who came around the table and they're like messy and they don't always agree with each other. And there are these like drag out type fights in Acts where they're trying to figure out who is this whole message for, and is it for these people or not these people, and do we make them do all these things or do we not make them do all these things? And then one of them stands up and goes, no, this is for all people. And we got to figure out how do we make this in some ways like accessible to all people. And this expansive table isn't just like this small table for a group of people, but what happens is throughout history, and as you even kind of move throughout Acts, it starts with a group of people, and then it grows, and then there's more than one of these tables all over the ancient world, and then there's thousands of these tables all over the ancient world, and it feels like it just continues to grow and expand, and then at some point in history, these tables began to get more and more and more, not inclusive, but exclusive. That if you believe the right things, then you can sit at my table, but if you don't, you can't. But if you get all the right things right and you figure out your life before you come in, then you can sit at my table, but if not, no. Or if you believe like I do when it comes to politics, you're welcome to my table, but if not, get out of my Facebook group. Sorry. That if you see the world the way I do, then you can sit here, but if not, I want you to distance yourself from it. And then all of a sudden, some of these tables became so inward focused that we were just so fascinated by the people around it, and we were never concerned about the people who weren't. And I think that's like a tragedy, right? Because the God of the universe, as creators of beauty in the world, didn't just invite us to the table of Jesus, but then we are called to build these expansive tables in our own lives and in our own world. That these tables wouldn't be just a group of people that I feel comfortable with or that sign all the right things and check all the right boxes, but this is a group of people who are extraordinarily diverse and think differently and act differently and move differently in the world than maybe I would. Now, can I be really blunt? Can we just pretend like, again, we're not a church and I'm not a pastor and, whatever. Sometimes that's really hard to do in Traverse City, right? We're not like the most diverse part of the country in some ways, right? Like I'm a 30-something-year-old white guy who makes a middle-level income, right? And you know what? I know a lot of 30-something white guys who make a middle-level income in Traverse City. And you look around and you just go like, it is so easy to live and breathe and just navigate my life at getting up at like whatever time I get up and moving throughout my day and dropping my kid off and going to work and ending my day by maybe stopping by Target for some Starbucks 3 or 4 times and then like getting home, right? And then being a dad of kids, husband to Emily, and going to sleep at night. And then waking up and just repeating, but not moving through my day, engaging with people who are different. And then it gets really fun. And this is like one of my favorite things. If you have social media, it gets really interesting because then like Facebook and the social media parts that you're a part of, like they begin to see what you look at, think about, and then they like define whatever your political stance is for you. I didn't know that, and then I didn't believe it. Then I looked, I was like, well, my gosh, you actually did that. So I had to change it. So I wanted to see people who thought differently than me. I started following all sorts of people. In fact, every once in a while I'll get an email or a text from somebody who doesn't like that I follow somebody else. I'm like, well, that's because I'm interested. I want to know people who disagree with me. I want to follow those people. And then it gets really awkward when I want to meet with them because I have to email them and they don't know me and I don't know them. And then it says pastor on my Facebook thing, which is always kind of weird for people. I'm like, hey, I read your post. I totally disagree with you, but I'd love to hang. And then that just always gets a little bit awkward, or Facebook Messenger. But I want to spend time with people who see the world and think differently than me. Why? Because this table isn't just for everybody who agrees with me. This table is expansive, and it's big, and it's different. And then for many of you, you know this, that when you start breaking out of some of those molds, you all of a sudden the things that you held so tightly that you were so sure about, and then you hear somebody's story, And all of a sudden, your grip on some of that just gets looser, or your capacity for grace just gets a little bit looser. And then all of a sudden, wait for it, you start looking a little bit more like Jesus. And you're like, what is that? And I think the power in this is that at the end of your life and at the end of my life, my goal isn't that I've just invited people into it who think and do what I do. That would, in some ways, be a little bit of a waste. But it's that we move through our world with the kind of like Muhammad Ali freedom in the ring, where we just experience the fullness of humanity and the grace that Jesus provides. I put in my notes, I said it this way. I said, at the end of our life, our greatest impact will be determined not simply by how much we know, but how expansive our table has become. At the end of your life and at the end of my life, you get whatever table that you have been building, and you get whatever people around it that you have been inviting in, and then all of a sudden you begin to discover this extremely colorful world of people who think differently, act differently, see the world differently, but at the same time, when you look in their eyes, you are still looking at a person who Jesus is madly in love with and is calling you to be in a relationship with. And that is the church. I wrote this down. I did the first message, and Emily said, hey, you should just read this quote because it's a great quote. It says, because Jesus eats with everyone, let my table be an altar for people, for strangers, for friends, and for family. And then I would add in, let those groups of people that sit at our table, may they be expanding in their depth and knowledge of us as a family. I talk to people all the time, especially like empty nesters, who are like, my kid walked away from faith. What do we do about that? I'm like, it's a great question. It's not my talks, for the most part. Those of you who laughed at that, you laughed a little too hard. That was mean. Just kidding. It's when we together create a table like this. It's when people who are distant from faith look at what is created and find it so irresistible that all of their objections to Jesus, which typically are pretty few, come down and are crushed at the weight at the kingdom that he's called us to build in the world. Which means that when we create these exclusive areas in our life, it is actually like anti-Christ, anti what Jesus called us to be. And so as I thought about this series, and this is part of the reason I changed the talk this morning, at 5:30, which is fantastic, over a McDonald's bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich. Biscuit, not sandwich. Gotta be clear. It was that my dream for us and for you as an individual is that you are able to experience the fullness of what it means to not live in an echo chamber with people who agree with you all the time. And that you would respond to the love and the grace that God has given you by extending the love and grace and compassion to other people. In fact, the gut-wrenching part that I feel like we have to genuinely answer is when it comes to your physical dinner table, how many times have you had people there who you know are different than you? How many times has somebody been so close in relationship to you that they look at you and they go, I know we differ, but my goodness, I'm thankful that I know you. How expansive are our tables really? And so I want to challenge you in this, right? This is what I want to challenge you with. I want us to expand the tables that we're part of. And so the first thing that I would tell you is this. You can't do this with 500 people. You have to do this with 2 or 3 first, right? Now, I'm the type of person that wants to do it with 500 people immediately, and then I just fail at all of it. And so what I'm saying is you have to figure out, how do you do it with 2 or 3 people first? And as soon as I said that, here's the hard part. Typically what happens when I say that to people is you have one person who you know that you absolutely don't want to do that with, and then you have the one medium kind of person, you're well, we can figure that out, and the one person you're I should have done that 3 weeks ago. But those 3 people are in your mind already. You need to figure out, how do I do this? How do I do this with a few? Not 500, but how do I do this with a few? The other thing I would say is this, you have to figure out, how do you prioritize, right, relationship over the risk? Which means that there's a part of you that goes, if I interact with people who disagree with me, they may not like me. And I'm going to tell you, it's not the disagreement that makes you unlikable. It's how you approach the disagreement that makes you unlikable, right? Like if people know that you are for them, it is very difficult for them not to lean in with you. It's just hard to do. You can disagree about so many things. You know how I know that? Because you have a mom and a dad, right? Like you get it. You disagree with your parents about a lot of things. But you know what? If your mom calls you and needs something, you're like, what do you need? I'll show up, you know? Like there's something about that. You can do it well, but you have to manage the risk. You have to know, like, hey, when it comes to that risk, I'm going to choose to move towards a relationship anyway. You also have to go, when it comes to the risk, I am not going to be worried about what other people think about what I'm going to do. Why? Because I'm going to show up in those areas with other people. You're going to do that. And you prioritize the relationship over the risk. The other one is this, and this one's tough. That you have to choose to serve others in proximity. And not just like distance-wise, but you have to choose to serve other people when it comes to being close to you. And I'll tell you, I struggle with this a lot because I'm great at like having friends that are like out here and just at enough of a distance where they don't see that I mess things up all the time, right? But I think like, here's my barometer lately, and I had to experience this one this morning as well. But my barometer to this is like, who that's different than you is close enough to you to where you've had to apologize lately, right? Like who's close enough to you that's different than you, that's at your table, that you've gone, you know what, I've messed this up recently, I should apologize. I had one this morning. I said something to my son that I shouldn't have said in front of somebody else. And I went, I should apologize to both you and the other person. Like there's just a part of that. Who is close enough to you to where you would even have to apologize to them? Or how many friends, let me ask you this way, how many friends do you have that you would never have to apologize to because they don't know what you're messed up in, right? And then the question that I want to haunt us, and then I'll ask Bryce and the band to come back out. The question that I want to like rattle in your brain, and we're going to end things a little bit different today, but the question is this: which three people in your life need an invitation to your table, right? That if you were invited to the table of Jesus and then he calls you to like build these tables of your own, what three people need to be invited into your sphere and your world now? Like, who are those individuals that you need to have a relationship with? I'll tell you for me, when I was in my early 20s, there was a couple named Billy and Joy Phoenix. I lived in Atlanta, Georgia at the time, and they let me stay in their basement. And at the time, I didn't know this, but I lived in their basement for like 2.5 years. And they were fantastic, and they would invite me to just like live life with them. I watched them parent their kids. I ate dinner with them. They exposed me to food that I had never had because it was not McDonald's. Like it was all sorts of things that were incredible. I ate guacamole. It was amazing. I didn't like it, but I ate it. Like there was all that, you know, like I watched how they corrected their kids. I watched their marriage. We do #Team Holden because Billy and Joy Phoenix said that when it comes to marriage, it's not just a marriage, it's a team effort. And I was like, that's really great. I thought to myself, like, that's sacred. And then I realized that what's so fascinating is that I thought I was the only one, but I wasn't the only one. That there were a lot of people who'd come in and out of their lives that lived in that basement and that had the same type of stories that I had. And then I'll never forget, like, there was a point for me, we were living in Ohio at the time, and I'm kind of laughing because my two roommates from college and we all started our families and ended up in the same area at the same time, like a block and a half from each other, and worked at the same place. And there was a night where we like did church, you know, like you come to church, you do church, and then we were leading these church efforts. And then all of a sudden there was a night where we actually experienced church. You ever had one of those? And we're sitting at our dinner table and we pull out the Bible and we started reading through Acts 2. And all of a sudden we're reading through it, like there's this like vulnerability that starts happening, and we had known each other for like 8 years at the time, and there's all of these things that are going on. And I'm like, that is sacred, that is different, that is divine, that is that thread through humanity that draws us together. And we sat there, and it was almost like silence at the end of it, and we all said together, that's what it should feel. That's what it should feel like. And my challenge to you is like, you have the opportunity to build that, and if you don't build that, and if you don't invite people into those spaces and into your own humanity and around your dinner table, as messy and chaotic as it may be, then what happens is you get to the end of your life and realize that you just spent time with people who agreed with you, and you just spent time with people who are safe, and you just kind of did it. But the beauty and the color and the mess and the fabric of what God has called us to do in terms of building his, not just church building, but church in the world, is to create these expansive tables in our lives. So what I'm going to challenge you to do today is going to be a little bit odd. And so I'm going to ask you to do this with me, and it's going to feel weird as soon as I ask you the very first thing, but I promise it's not going to be as weird as it sounds as I start. So I'm going to ask you to do this. I'm going to ask you to pull out your cell phone, if you would. We're going to take notes just on one thing real quick. So if you would, I'm going to ask you to take out your cell phone. If you're not a cell phone type person because you have a flip phone, that's totally okay. This is a safe place. If you pull out something to write with, I'd love for you to do that just for a second. And I'm going to walk you through an exercise that I've been doing for a while, but I've especially been doing recently. And of all the things that we do that we call holy, I feel like this is probably the most sacred of them. I'm going to ask you to pull that out, and I put up this question, and the question is this, right? Which three people in your life need an invitation to your table, right? Which three people in your life need like this invitation to your table? So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to actually answer that question and write their names down. And if you don't have three people, that's totally okay. There was a point in my life I didn't have three people, and so I would love for you just to write, God, help me to find three people, or like open my eyes to who those people are in my life, because we all have those people that are around us. But I want you to write those three people's names. Like, who are these people that need to be invited into closer proximity to you? Now, as you're doing that, I asked Bryce to play just so that you could be a little bit more focused with ambient music, because that's how I study, and I feel like maybe that's helpful to you. And then also, as we do this, I told the guys this morning that I wanted a very massive table that's heavy. So I'm going to invite these guys to come out. You guys can grab the table and strike the stage. But we're going to do one other thing after this. But I want you to think about those three people. So as you're doing it, write those three people down, however that works for you, and get those down on paper, if you would, for a second. Now, after you've had those down, here's what I know about you, is probably not all three of them, but at least one of those people, you probably have their phone number in your phone, or you know their information, email address, Snapchat, Twitter, whatever it is that you would use to communicate with the individuals that you just wrote down. What I'm going to ask you to do, and it's going to feel really odd on a Sunday morning at, 12:15. It's shorter than 9, though. You're welcome. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to text them right now, and it's going to seem really odd on a Sunday at 12:15 to do that, but here's what I'm going to ask you to text them, and however you want to do it. I want you to invite them to hang out with you this week. Not like 4 weeks from now, but I'm gonna, like, however you're going to do it, I just want you to be like, hey, Andrew, what's up, bro? I'm kidding. Whatever it is that you would write, we should hang out this week. Simple. I didn't give them a time, because generally people respond to a time. You guys are so strong. That's pretty good. I want you to text, I really do. I want you to, like, right now to text whoever that person is, right? The person that you know that should be around your table that isn't. I want you to send them a text, tweet, Instagram, DM, whatever, right now before you leave this room. Some of you like trembling as you do it. Just so you know, I did it at 5:30 this morning. They weren't super happy that I texted them at 5:30, but I did do it this morning, so. Now, here's why this matters, and this is the challenge that I want you to feel. Ready? Is that for many of us, the only way to like break out of the bubbles and expand the tables that we're a part of are to do this on a regular basis. And for those of you who are introverts like me, it really takes a lot to do that. But there is a beauty in actually expanding your table to people that are different than you. And if you actually did that, just for a second, I want you to think about this. Several hundred people showed up and sat in these seats today. If several hundred people did that, the expansiveness of our table would grow so exponentially, it's crazy. And it's not about getting people in this room, that's not it. But people like ending up in your home around a table or at a coffee shop, having a real conversation, it matters. And because that matters, I'm going to ask you to do one last thing before you leave. I'm going to ask you to take your cell phone, piece of paper, whatever it is that you put those things on. I'm going to ask you to just put it in your hand just for a second, and we're going to pray over it. And it's going to be like the simplest prayer, but I'm going to ask you if you would just put your cell phone in your hand, piece of paper in your hand, whatever that is. And I'm going to ask you to pray a very simple prayer, and then we're going to sing a song to wrap up our day. But this is the prayer. The prayer is, God, help me to do this more often. Super deep. We're going deep today, people. God, help me to do this more often. And if you didn't have names, I want you to pray, God, help me to see the people around me that I need to invite to my table. So great. So I'm going to invite the band to come out. We're going to wrap up with a song, and before we sing it, I'm going to pray for us. The song we're going to wrap up with is a song called Gracefully Broken. And this song is incredible because at the end of it, if you've heard it before, Carrie goes into this like other world kind of thing, which is great. But when she goes into it, it talks about like your work and your power in me. And it talks about it essentially like moving through us. And so for those of you who are followers of Jesus for the next few minutes, especially when we get to that part, you can sing, you can not sing, you can look at the lyrics, whatever. But I think my hope for you is that at the forefront of your mind when you think about God's power moving in you and through you, what I hope that happens is it's like practical steps just like this that move us forward and deeply engaging with other people's humanity. So I'm going to ask you to stand. I'm going to pray for us. We're going to sing this song together, and then we'll wrap up. So go ahead and stand. I'm going to pray for us, and we'll sing this together. Father, for many of us today, like the idea of like stretching out relationally to people who are distant from you, people who are distant from us, people who we don't understand, God feels like a stretch for many of us. And it can feel like a stretch for so many different reasons, because the reasons that kind of like divide us, it's not like they're not important. They are. But God, I pray that somehow, some way, that we figure out how to like transcend those barriers and go beyond those borders of our relationships. And that as we do that, you would both change us and change the communities that we're a part of. God, I pray for the person who's like never really had a conversation with somebody who sees the world differently or sees themselves differently or in a different community altogether. God, I pray that you would help them to take those courageous steps, and with each courageous step that you would give them more courage to do that. And God, I pray for all of us that by the end of our lives, these expansive tables that we talked about today, God, I pray that they would be so expanded that it would almost feel like there's a group of people who would line up in some ways to thank us for building that family styles table in our lives because of the influence and power that the table had and our influence through it. And I pray that you would help us to genuinely make an impact, that we would do something beautiful in the world in the ways that we create these spaces to connect with other people. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Having these hands and multiply, God, all that I am, and find my heart on the altar again. Set me on fire, set me on fire. Oh, take all I have in these hands and multiply, God, all that I am, and find my heart on the altar again. Set me on fire, set me on fire. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. us now, holding nothing back. We're holding nothing back. I surrender. I surrender. Yes, I surrender. I surrender. Oh, you I am. Arms wide open. You I pouring out. Arms wide open. You I pouring out. Gracefully
Your power at work in me. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be free. Your power at work in me. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be free.
Your power
Your power at work in me.
broken gracefully. I'm strong and I will be free. Your power
God's gonna work in me.
gracefully. I'm strong and I will be free. Your power I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong and your power I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong and I will be free.
Yes, Lord.
Well, I want to say, to those of you who followed us in that last part, I want to say thank you so much for kind of accepting that challenge. And here's kind of the bigger challenge for you. So you did that one time today on a Sunday in a service. So I'm going to actually ask you to do this. You did that once today, so now you know that you can do it. You're great. I'm going to ask you to do it one time every day this week, right? One time every day this week, just to kind of get that in your mentality. Some of these people are going to have to text more than once anyway, so there you go. But I'm going to ask you to do that over the course of this next week, and that we would expand these tables specifically with people who see the world different than we do. So that's be a challenge, and we'd love to hear stories as you begin doing that throughout the city as well. The other thing I want to let you know, if you're new to our church, we'd love to connect with you. Again, I think you've heard this a couple times already, but we've got an environment in the lobby called The Hub. We'd love to meet you out there. And then next week, I want to let you know that we're kicking off a brand new series called Kensington Goes to the Movies. So you don't hear a 40-minute talk next week. You hear an ish longer talk, but you get movie clips along the way. So for your friend who doesn't want to hear me speak for a long time, it's great because you get to watch movies throughout. It's going to be amazing. So we would love for you to come back next week, invite some people with you. It's going to be an amazing, amazing series. So we'll see you right back here next Sunday for Kensington Goes to Movies Part 1. See you soon. Thank you so much for watching online. We're so glad that you decided to join us today, and we hope that you enjoyed your experience with us as well. And then if you're not already doing so, we'd love to invite you to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Those are really the best places to find out more information about our church and all the things that are going on around here as well. And then as I said, next week we're kicking off a brand new series. We'd love to invite you back for that, especially in person. The in-person experience next week is going to be incredible as we start talking about this movie series, so we'd love to invite you back for that. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next week.